Welcome to another episode of the Nine Summoning Insight, presented by AT&T. Thorin and I are here once again to talk about the best region in the world. Remember when we used to actually talk about the best region in the world on this show, Thorin, and it wasn't just an LCS and LEC show?
Do you want to trigger me, mate? So if you want to trigger me, I've got a little home truth right at the beginning of the episode that no one's going to like. So you know this is going to be a great episode.
Oh,
Are you ready for the little truth that nobody likes, right? One of the criticisms, you'll have heard it yourself loads of times, Monty, like when you left Overwatch League, when you left LCK, I guarantee you know this criticism when I tell you it, is when people try to spin it that like we have no actual fans and people just incidentally watch the broadcast and we're just lucky. Like they could put any Joe from the street there and the same people would watch. Well, here's how I know that's not true. Because the LPL has far and away, like right now, it's ridiculous. They have like a 10 times more entertaining level of gameplay than Korea does. But people on Reddit still follow Korea and don't follow the LPL. Now, one of the reasons I would say that is a speculation, is I actually think it's because they have LS on the LCK. Like, guess what? This is a guy you know his character, you draw into his personality, he can be fun, he can do the people who do the LPL tend to be, because they have a rotating cast. We're going to have some of the people on today. They tend to be people where that's one of their first big stops and they've come from the lower leagues and then they build themselves up and they're maybe a couple of years away from being an LS. So it shows that whole angle that they just watched Korea because it was the best. It's nonsense. Like that's not even how that OGN channel was built up. It was built up from you and Doa.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about that is like we started. So, for example, when I came over was after the Season 2 World Finals. So this was before Korea was winning like world championships, right? And we really saw a lot of movement, even to the point where before SKT won Worlds in 2013, there were like 150,000 concurrents, which was enormous at the time, especially in the middle of the night for that KT Bullets versus SKT match that had the Faker Ryu Zed versus Zed. So that was the summer finals before we even got there. And a lot of that was, I think, that we had really nailed the tone of the LCK broadcast. And then even after we left, people like Papa, Valdez, Atlas, LS, these people continued the tone that we had.
Yes.
Because we set up.
Atlas does a great job, by the way, of doing like a neo Doa, basically. I think he's an awesome job with that tone.
Yeah. I think Atlas is like really good at that. So I think it was more of like we created a product that was LCK, because you have to understand,
it's like an atmosphere, right? Like a culture.
Because like what Doa and I literally did, this was very, very intentional. I don't know if I've really ever like talked about this before publicly. We sat down and we're like, okay, so how are we going to win? Because how are we going to get fans to care about this? Because we're obviously always going to be on a piggyback broadcast. We always have to follow the Korean caster, so we can never really control the broadcast flow. So we're going to have to slow things down quite a bit and have more of a conversational tone, because that's the only way this is going to work, because they're not actually producing around what we're doing and what we're saying. Furthermore, we said, who is the audience for this? Now, if you're just a fan of a team, or you're a fan of, players you can really like, watch their vlogs and get to know. Because remember, at the time, there was no English content for the Korean players. So the fans really had a hard time like getting to know their personalities. We said, well, like we're going to have to try and like really invent characters for these guys. And that's where things like the Immortal Score came from, where we started to have it to like drop nicknames and like really like build up their star power.
MacNoon, all those guys. Yeah,
ourselves. I mean, MacNoon was fortunate because he had a lot of personality. Sure. And then, the other factor of this too was like, who is going to watch this? Well, you get the best gameplay. Like we knew at the time in 2013, but obviously pleb fans would say like, oh, well, how could you know? They haven't played each other. Well, if you know how to watch games. But even after that, it was like, so who's staying up until like 2 a.m. in NA to start watching these games, or who's up early in the morning in Europe? Not a great time zone. So it's going to be the hardcore fans. So we said, we are going to make sure our casting is targeted towards that hardcore fan base. We're going to talk about high level strategy. We're going to talk about nuance. And if something normal is happening, we're not going to talk about it. We're not going to pander to you and try and explain the basics. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to banter or like have fun or talk about other shit that's not even in the game, because we think that that's what the audience wants. And I think we're right.
That's even something that actually just organically occurred in CSGO, where obviously as a game, compared to the League of Legends, it's actually a very hardcore game. It's not to me because it was the original League of Legends, it was the pleb game. But since CSGO, as a general baseline, you're not getting beginners watching the game. Like anyone who's watching must have watched at least a few years. Like it's just such an old game, and the maps are the same, all the rest of it. So one of the things in CS:GO that similarly developed, like you're saying here, was people just learned, like when it was like a pure save round, which to be fair doesn't happen as much in CS:GO economy now, but it did back in the day. If you knew it was a pure save round and nothing interesting was happening in the round, you didn't cast it. You talk over it, and that's when you have a little extra chance for the analyst to have some breathing room, or you have a back and forth. Or you throw some fun in. Anders and Semler would do a similar thing. So, yeah, I think it's interesting how you sort of cultivate the broadcast. Because as I alluded to, by the way, it's absolutely the case that even though they've won 2 worlds and like an MSI, all sorts of stuff in the last few years, dude, nobody cares about China. I'm telling you straight up. And here's how I know. I'm in all those Reddit threads. They're barely populated. Then when the semi-finals of LPL comes around, people are literally posting like top comments are like discussions about like talking about like whether Ning's fallen off, like stuff that's like, she didn't watch the entire year then. And then probably craziest of all, I'll just challenge everyone to a little thought experiment. Back in the day, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, when Korea was the absolute zenith of League of Legends, you could listen to any podcast, even Western ones, even the Dive and all that, and they'd every now and then veer into that territory. They wouldn't go full on, obviously, but they'd make some comments, I like the way that SKT's playing, or this guy's coming up, or maybe, Rox Tigers is on the rise, I like them. Dude, you never hear them say any of the names of the Chinese teams. They never, ever say it. Like, for example, we'll get into it on this show. Dude, I can't even believe how whack this is. This is the best region in the world, the most competitive region in the world, the most talent-stacked region in the world, and none of the real storylines made it to the West. Like, for example, one thing that I'm definitely going to get into in this episode is there was a brand new team called E-Star, who at one point in time was leading the LPL like halfway through the split. And if I told you these names, dude, no one knows these names. Like, I know one of them, and I used to follow the LPL to do a show with Raz. Like, I don't know any of them. So the idea that isn't like the headline story around the world. Like, wait a minute, the World Championship region has like nobodies at the top. Now, listen, they didn't make it. They flopped in the playoffs, unfortunately. They kind of fell off at the end of the season. But this just shows you, same as there was still morons saying stuff in like middle of the split, like FPX is the best team in the world. It's like, dude, they're not even the best team in the LPL. What are you talking about? Like, so all I'm saying is, listen, I can see that these things don't happen because I try to keep my finger on the pulse of the community. And then one other thing I'd throw in as well is this actually doubles into what you were saying about how can you know they're the best stuff if they haven't played? I'll tell you why. Are you ready for the ultimate blasphemy in esports? But I'm going to say it anyway because I'm Thorin. Here's the ultimate blasphemy. There only is the eye test. The eye test is God. Everything else is just the angels around the eye test. And so what everything else in League of Legends is how you just rationalize and they articulate the eye test. That's why someone can be a super duper knowledgeable person. Someone can be top of their field, but I sometimes think their eye test is whack. Like everyone out there, shout out to all of you who thought Kobe was the best AD carry in Season 9 Spring. Go back and watch the games. Break them down for me if you want. You won't be able to ever convince me. I watched the eye test. I had a million discussions and no one could ever convince me of this. So similarly, I actually genuinely think that's one of the problems is when people watch the LPL, it is the best region, but because their eye test is busted, they just still see what they used to see. Like, it's just a bunch of random games and upsets and like, it's just boring, isn't it? It's like, no, that's how your broken brain like processed your bad eye test. So I know that sounds like blasphemy because everyone's going to be like, oh, you think you're at the level of all these amazing casters. It's like, you know what? On that aspect, I do. I'm actually baller enough to say I am. I definitely couldn't explain it, by the way. I have no chance to explain it.
It is a transferable skill across like sports and esports as well, where if you watch enough of it, you will be able to tell based on your own criteria whether a player is actually good or not. Anyway, I totally
agree. That'd be a fun episode, isn't it, Monty?
One other thing I will say, and like we're not going to get into this with Lyric and Raz, obviously, because they're not going to be able to say anything about this.
We've got some housekeeping to do.
Well, one of the things about China and what you're saying, Thorin, is that LPL has had a terrible time retaining casters. And if you look at people like Raz and like Froskerin, who started their careers really loving the LPL before it was cool, before it was a good region, you would think that now that it's great, now that they're world champions, why wouldn't these people want to stay there? And the answer to that question is that Tencent in China is the one who contracts the Korean or the casters for the LPL, and Riot HQ really doesn't have anything to do with it. And to put
every
it
now and
mildly,
then they step in here a bit more, but yeah, I agree generally.
Like the thing is that LPL is currently not willing to pay to retain talent. That is what is going
Oh, it's an absolute fact, yeah.
Yeah, that's just a fact. And that sucks because we're never going to get a consistent, it has been just sort of a revolving door of personalities. And as soon as people start to get recognition, guess what? They fuck off other places. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of casting the LPL, which is a big bummer because we can't have, that really like consistent level to LPL casting that I think a lot of us would like to see. Now, I'm happy for the people who are able to get an opportunity in this system and come up, but at the same time, like, come on, LPL. Like, please, for our sake in the West, just get some, retain your talent and pay them a good amount of money so that they want to continue to stay living in China and doing this and giving us a better product.
That's also part of the problem, like I alluded to, is that they never get to properly establish the casters and then do some of the things you're talking about, because everyone, it almost feels like they're just on like a 1-year contract. Like, am I going to be there next? Depends what happens then. So you never fully get the chance to do it. So a lot of these people, every year when I tune into the LPL, I'm not exaggerating because I don't claim to follow everything. I'm always like, who's this guy? And then I have to look into it. And if they're good, interesting, where have you found this guy from? Sometimes it's literally just like, isn't this like the World Championship region? What? Where's the massive names? Like, how can the massive names be doing like LCS? Like, that doesn't even make sense, by the way, in terms of viewership. Like, what?
Well, Lyric's in our chat right now saying that he wants to stay. And, if you want to talk about this, buddy, go ahead. But for the most part, I think you're going to find that past a certain point, unless things change, and I hope they do for you, that it's going to be, you're going to have much more attractive offers.
Maybe he's the unicorn.
Maybe he's the unicorn who won't take the RMBs to cast LPL, the hero we deserve. I personally would advise that you, stabilize your career a little bit, make sure that you're getting the resources you need, because you could be the best caster in the world right now in LPL, and it's not going to matter because no one's going to watch it. So
exactly,
life sucks. We should fix that problem. We should all be watching. I should be watching more LPL. I didn't watch very much LPL at all this year. But again, this is part of it is, Flashpoint, having a kid, my life. But part of it is also that NA sucks for watching League of Legends compared to Europe, because in Europe, you get all the best games in your time zones. You get Europe or you get Korea and LPL in the morning, and then in the afternoon, you get all the European matches. Too bad for you guys, I guess, that NALCS is whatever in an unwatchable time slot, but it's the most unwatchable league.
Just play League of Legends during that time.
So EU is definitely OP when it comes to watching League of Legends.
Which is funny, by the way, because like the whole premise used to be that like, this is one of the things I always said, and then everyone just ignored me forever, is like, do you really think the reason the LCS broadcast had the most viewers is because it was the best? No, it's because the NA people didn't watch Europe, and then the European people watched Europe and NA. And you forcibly made the broadcast have to be a lead-in for your other broadcast. And what a surprise, the second you took the chains off, what do you know? Now you can't get that horse back in the stable, can you? I don't know why I used that mixed metaphors there. It's probably never got whatever.
Unchain the horses.
Exactly. Stop chaining horses, right, game. I'm not going to accept it anymore.
Quit chaining the horses. I agree with you, though. I think like LEC was extremely poorly run before and also had no resources to be better run. And as soon as the leadership at LEC changed, a lot of people don't know that there was a guy named Jason Ye who went bye-bye. And that was a big catalyst for things improving. As soon as they got some money and actually rebranded everything, it's been going great. Also helps that they are among the best teams in the world now, but they were always better than NA. But Thorin, I've said this to you before. That's why I knew Flashpoint was going to work, because I knew from LCS that you could put the right wrapping on crap and people would still enjoy it.
Oh, of course, yeah. And they just already know the names there, etc. It's what the other regions couldn't break through in that respect.
Yeah,
it had the momentum of past seasons in a way.
All right, so let's take a quick little break here. We're gonna get Raz and Lyric on. If they want to comment on the things that I said, I would not advise doing that.
Nah, just talk about LPL. Don't worry about it, boys. Talk about the game.
We'll talk about some Jatt to Team Liquid as well. Obviously, that's the big news this week. Right. And considering Raz is coaching in NA right now, probably an interesting topic of conversation to have. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll be on to some LPL Finals talk. This is our Cloud Connections segment by AT&T. Now we're bringing on, oops, I put them in the wrong boxes, but I'll change that right now. Raz and Lyric. So Raz now coaching Golden Guardians Academy. He got fed up with LPL. but not enough to change his Twitter handle from Raz LPL.
A good Twitter name, and also it's back from my roots, so I take those, man. I accept it until I find a better one.
So Golden Guardians hasn't forced you to change yet, is what you're saying?
Yeah, they haven't, basically.
Nice. All right. Your hair is too tall for the box. We're all enjoying our quarantine haircuts right now.
It's one of the best things you've ever said to a guest.
The debate is whether I keep it if I go into an actual afro, but the issue is maintenance. So I'd rather not every morning have to deal with that nonsense.
That does sound like a pain in the ass. I've just given up on dealing with my hair whatsoever. So,
by the way, Monty, you know when you were saying to Lyric when he was in the chat there, I hope people realize, again, it's all about where you are. You know, when you're a kid and you don't want to eat your dinner, and then your mom's like, there's starving kids in Africa, and you obviously just think like, yeah, but I'm not in Africa, so like, why would I care about this? Like, I just don't like this food. It's all about perspective, right? Where are you? So you have to understand, Lyric has literally been like, he is like a journeyman of esports. This guy was like coaching in the LMS. Like, by the way, when nobody watched the LMS, he was in like Malaysia or something. He was in Brazil. He was all over the place. This guy. So as a result, to him, the LPL is like, the pro gets up in. He's known now. People on Reddit don't just instantly downvote his totally accurate and informed opinions about the region he coaches in because they've watched one game at MSI. Like, it's a whole new world for you, right, Lyric?
Yeah, man, fucking true. Holy shit. Like, casting in the LPL, oh god, like 5 people watch us? Oh my god, it's such an upgrade.
I was one of those 5 people, and then trying to push, back in the day, push people through to the good games through the countdown of Monte Cristo, where I was highlighting some LMS games at least. But yeah, it has been a world tour. Although I'm sure you're quite cultured now from living on multiple continents and dealing with League of Legends. So good for you for sticking to it.
Yeah, man, definitely.
Wait a minute.
I mean, he did spend 9 hours a day just looking at one ad. What did you say?
I was asking, how is it uplifting your life basically every other split? Because for me, going to LA was already a big pain in the ass. So like, I can't imagine like that process.
I don't know. It's actually not that bad. Like again, I went from like LMS to Turkey to LMS to Brazil to NA to like LMS. So I don't know. It's pretty normal now.
What the hell? All right. Well,
it's just a nomad at this point in time. It just has no home.
So how did you even start as a caster then in LPL? What got you into your foot in the door there?
So last split, I coached Flamingo. For anyone who doesn't know, Flamingo was the Brazilian team at Worlds, and I've known Clement for. Yep, exactly. I've known Clement Chu for a long time, right? I was a coach in LMS, so me and Clement would talk all the time at the studio. So Clement's like, dude, we need some casters. Do you want to put an application? I've never thought about casting before, but I loved LPL in summer. I watched a ton of LPL last split, and I was like, okay, like, it seems like a new challenge. Let's do it. And I was just so surprised when I actually got accepted and like, oh God, like, let's see where this goes. And now here I am in LPL.
You really shouldn't be. I was actually, it was a blessing when I heard that you were basically coming in. Not only did you have like prior coaching experience, but like the fact that you had, and I've seen you like multiple times on Twitter as well, like you had the interest in LPL, like in Chinese League of Legends, like for so long. You've been in like the LMS and been working in that front. So I was like, wow, you prior experience, like the knowledge that comes with it, like everything I thought was like insane to have. So like,
dude, I love LPL. Last split, I was a Victory 5 fan. Who's a V5 fan?
No one. Not even V5 players. Okay, get out of the shit now.
Instantly gone.
Yeah. You have to understand, the reason why Raz appreciates all that, right, is because you know how you always appreciate in someone else but the qualities you don't have. Obviously, all that stuff's brilliant. Raz just has the golden voice. That's all he's got. And great gifts.
Oh, dude, I know. I wish I had those things.
By the way, that gift that Monty used there, that is one of the all-time great gifts. The one where you're taking the jacket off. Like I have that. If I even see that, it's like when someone Rick rolls me. I always make the joke that I think that's a brilliant song. So I just play it through the whole time. Every time someone Rick rolls me, cheers, just like to remind me of a brilliant song from the 80s. So every time I see that gif, I have to press play and watch the whole thing.
Just so people know the backstory behind that, like that was the first time we went to China, or at least I went to China for a finals event. Like the night before. Hot pot in Beijing, disgusting. Don't do that because like the next day you just have the worst like bowel syndrome. Like I was dehydrated as hell, and I was like powering through a best of 5. I was like, I just gotta dance and like at least get some energy through me. And my producer's like, this is great entertainment. Get that on. I put him on it. You could thank my producer for that one. But man, yeah, that was for me. That was a horrendous time. And then you looking back to it, all I could do is laugh at it.
Amazing. I'm glad I know the backstory behind that now.
Oh my god.
I can also confirm, by the way, that is the main problem with when you go to an Asian country and you come from the West, is like the food's all delicious, but like if you have it once, yeah, you'd be all right. Try just do what I did. Like I used to just go, and every time I used to just like, it was almost like I was doing a purge of my system. I would just eat Korean barbecue 3 times a day for the first week. And all I'm going to say is, yeah, I spent like a quarter of the time just going to the toilet, basically. Like, when it's its end, but instead of just being a normal person and eating some rice in the middle and some vegetables, I was like, I'm just going to go through this. I'm just going to just when I get out the other side, it'll all be cool. And I did. I always got back out the other side. I don't know what damage it's probably done to my colon, but that's not really something I talk about in League of Legends.
There's one place where it's a roulette. Like there's a roulette wheel. Every night, if I'm ordering from this place, it's a coin toss. And I know the risks.
China's a different story compared to like Korea or Taipei or Japan. Like it's truly a roulette. Like, holy shit.
Yes. I have been to Shanghai a few times now, and it's dicey out there for sure. Are you still having issues even though you're sort of used to it now?
Oh my god, like most places I honestly just avoid. Like again, I was like Thorin when I would boot camp in Korea, I'd eat out every night. In Taipei, I'd eat out every night. In Shanghai, I just can't trust it, man. I just don't do it.
Aside, Taiwan, like amazing food. Loved it. I was like, I really want to go back to Taipei just because of the night. Like literally every part of that country has like amazing food to just enjoy. Go back to China, and I just have to pick and choose which place that I enjoy. Otherwise, I mean, you can't complain.
All right, so should we talk about some actual League of Legends now, or do you want to say your piece on working for the LPL Lyric? Don't burn any bridges, buddy.
Like I won't burn any bridges, but like the one thing I will say compared to what you said coming in was, like honestly, I got paid more when I was coaching, but I actually kind of feel like the same ceiling exists in coaching that exists in casting, in a sense that, like, sure, I guess a natural transition would be a GM role, but I also feel like I can get that GM role through moving to casting. And it's like to where maybe some casters, like maybe Raz can attest to this, you kind of feel like you want a new challenge, you want something more exciting. I felt that in coaching as well, to where casting is so different, and it doesn't matter if you know the game. Like talking live about something is so different compared to like being able to pause a VOD and like take a few seconds to digest and like think it out, right? So like honestly, someone joked at me like, oh, you're gonna get poached by LAC, and it's like, man, the only reason I changed to casting was because I love the LPL. Like watching Chinese League of Legends is like, oh god, it's its own like sick twisted joy. So yeah, I want to be here.
It is a very specific kink. I'll give you that. See, for me, in Korean League of Legends, I was more about the Dom relationship, right? Where you have total control over the game. That's what really like got me off. I feel like you're just like in there for like the group orgy or whatever it is that is the LPL. It's very, very different. Very different kink.
The problem is, Monty, we have to explore this analogy, because in this analogy, as a KT fan, you obviously enjoyed a lot of like, breath play, like really going close to the safe word. You find Uncle quite a lot,
Edging.
And then at the end, failed orgasms in finals, everything for you, man.
Exactly. It was edging with no release. It was edging with no release. And the funny thing is when I got the first release, it was of course KT Arrows, who I didn't even like, who had to win.
Exactly.
Right? So it was just incredibly disappointing in that way, where it's like, no, I wanted KT to win, but not that KT. Not that one. Not you, Hachani. You're not allowed to win titles.
Oh my god. I will say with the LPL, like when I was casting it back in the day, the worst thing is like the fact that you don't have control, right? I would despise any newbie versus like LGD game. If it was like Swift versus like basically any psychopathic jungler that will just constantly start fights. Ning is the new version of that, but and you just, as an analyst, you'd want to explain the previous play, or at least make the attempt to. But you can't do that, because not only is the production throwing you a replay of the last play, but then you just got out of the replay into a now new fight, and you're just kind of just riding the wave of the game, and you're just like, okay, play by play, take over. Like I refuse.
I just want to know, like, people want you to explain the game. When I came into casting, people were like, oh, you want to predict what's going to happen in draft. It's like, how do I predict what's going to happen when people are first picking Trundle in this region? And, like, that's not happening anywhere else. Like,
hey, I think
shit.
it's actually a good idea. I mean, we could talk about that, but I think it's not terrible.
From talking to the teams here, I actually don't think it's terrible either, because I've actually worked with a lot of the coaching staff in like some of the teams here, so I can understand their like reasoning. But then I'll watch like veteran streamer LS's stream and see their reaction to it.
Shit.
And,
Yeah,
oh
of
god,
course.
yeah.
I actually think
depends.
it's pretty decent because it doesn't have a lot of bad matchups. It has decent ganking, and it's a really safe first pick. Like, it's not going to knock your socks off. Like, he basically has one ability, which is Ice Dildo. That's his only thing that he does, but it's
Actually,
good enough.
The players here don't think it has any bad matchups. I talked to players on like EDG, RNG. They even think champions like Graves and Kindred, they don't win. Like, they truly believe it has no bad matchups. So that's a really interesting thing about Chinese players, that like you'll hear these other analysts like, oh, you can pick Graves, you can pick Kindred, you can pick AP champions, and Chinese players are like, no, like Trundle still wins.
Yeah,
and
the problem
Chinese players care about matchups.
Yeah, the problem with this discussion is because, at least in the LPL mindset, is that you're always going into an early skirmish, right? You're always opting into these early fights that Trundle enjoys, just adores, because he's roping in his side laners to help him out through like Trundle Pillar that destroys Kindred and Graves in like larger skirmishes, where if you have slower game paces, like Graves and Karthus and Kindred all thrive in those experiences. And it's like those, basically, I don't think these LPL teams have gone up against a strong enough Graves team, a strong enough Kindred team.
To be fair, they were also banning Graves during the final. He was banned.
Yes, the Graves, at least in the finals, we were finally getting Graves bans. Because like throughout the entire split, it would not be punished. Finally, like Kanavi came out with consistent Graves picks, and we're like, okay, now this is an awful experience, because now Graves is just disgusting in those early skirmishes as well. But I just think that, at least in LPL, probably it's never going to happen, where you're going to have teams force longer game times and like try and make it basically playing towards the Kindred strength or towards the Karthus strength. Like when Korea and EU was playing Karthus, like China just didn't. Like there would be a few teams, but it'd be the few teams with a strong jungler, but with like really bad players, so they would just lose anyways, and you just get the wrong message out of it. So like that's my biggest issue, is that I do think that Trundle by itself is safe, but in the highest level of play, or at least when you're going up against strong ranged carry junglers, it shouldn't be like that.
Okay, okay, that's fine, but we don't see a lot of players globally playing strong ranged carry junglers. First off, I'm trying to think right now who we saw in the West doing that recently. Blabber played a couple games of Kindred, but it wasn't until playoffs. I think he played it once in the regular season, if not 0 times, off the top of my head. So we really, and he's the only one in LCS.
I mean, the joke is, Trundle was played in LEC. Hillasang played it as a support, and it was like carrying the game on it.
Look, it's a good
point.
That's a good point, Thorin. It also, now I haven't seen enough LPL to know this, but it is also a good flex pick. So you can.
Oh, in LPL, not at all.
Not at all.
Flexed even once.
You do have to flex it in, like, they don't play Senna in LPL. I know that, and that's where it flexes, is into a Senna lane. So there are other caveats, like the dominoes have to fall right, but LPL doesn't pick or ban Senna, so I guess that's not going to be happening.
And that's the thing too. Going into a wider discussion of drafts for the region, it's like Trundle is the least of my worries, right? Because while I would talk about those picks, it's like now Ornn got nerfed to a certain degree, and then Blade of the Rune King got buffed, where set higher priority. But like even before that, when Ornn was just a go-to, you have to pick it, they went Renekton or Aatrox first pick.
Dude, we weren't even playing Blade of the Rune King champions. Like Renekton was not building Blade of the Rune King in LPL. It was hilarious.
And Set was still not building Blade of the Rune. Like, it was still crazy, because like they would value laning phase so much so.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a set picks or bans in this final, which is also weird. I mean, and to your credit, like, you guys did talk about that during the cast, saying like, I thought you guys did a very good job knowing that there were going to be a bunch of people watching those finals who were not familiar with LPL, saying like, well, here in LPL, we play for lane. And so therefore you're not going to see any of this shit that you might see in other regions while teams are trying to scale or trying to get, some sort of backline threat with set. Instead, you're just going to see these weird matchups that are apparently enjoyable. I suppose the Cassidy in the last game was sort of the exception to that, but
one thing I want to ask, since I referenced it in the intro, so let's get out of the way now. Before we get into all the finals and the top teams and what they do internationally, the team I referenced in the intro, E-Star, which is basically my tell that nobody in the West watches LPL, definitely not even some of the big names, because the idea when they were top of the LPL, and for most of the season, like top 2, top 3, until basically right towards the end, the idea that that's the perfect storyline for anyone who's a caster. Like these players are like low-level players, or the players that never been, or players that were just like in low-level teams, etc. Now they're literally beating some of the best teams in the league. Even at the end, to give people some details, the team that won the LPL, Jingdong Gaming, the second place team in the regular split, only won 1 series more than the E-Star team and only won 3 individual games more. And in China, you play almost 40 games basically over the split. So the idea that you could do it with that level of consistency, who is this team? Give us some insight, some background on this team.
This team is a mix of RNG's LDL team and the Young Miracles team, which a lot of people know as this team that always breeds talent. They brought up Ying, exactly, things like that. They were owned by PDD. And the thing they did so well was they played one strategy, which is pretty much every LPL team, honestly. They played one strategy super well where they would consistently just gank bot lane at level 2 or level 3 and then play out these really engage-heavy skirmish comps based on things like Leona, Blitzcrank. Xiaoxi's really a famous Thresh player. But once teams started banning out their jungle Waze Jarvan, this team pretty much just became an average LPL team, right? And they obviously lost in the first round of playoffs, so they weren't too special. But the level of mechanical skill on a team coming not even from LDL, honestly, this is just a bunch of random players thrown together, is honestly amazing. It's pretty astounding, even with them losing in the first round of playoffs.
You know what's hilarious is the similarities from this team to Dan Gaming when I would cast is ridiculous, right? Because it was basically they came in with a set identity, and it was probably an easiest identity to play because all you were really doing is grouping up, skirmishing with the best level 6 champions, or really and you were always on the same page as well. And it's super impactful for teams that are coming into the spring split, honestly, with new rosters, conflicting ideals, especially if you have veterans that have their own way of playing the game, so they're not always on the set path. But it's super easy to get new players on the same page, right? New players that just want to succeed, have that thirst and drive, but have no prior experience on a major stage. And so they're humbled in a lot of cases. And so you see that from these teams. The biggest difference, though, from them and Dan Gaming in the past is that they have damn good players, mechanically skilled players. While Goong was on Dan, Cryin is actually incredibly talented as a player. And he was, I think, highest MVPs in the LDL. If we were talking about who we expected to be in an LPL team going into that split, I thought that Cryin would be on another team, right? Picked up by someone else because there's at this team growing exponentially, or 16 or something, increasing numbers of teams. I was okay, one of them would want to improve their mid lane chances, and so Cryin is that best bet. But then this team had not only accrued Cryin, Xiaobai actually was also a pretty strong top laner as well. And so and then Xiaoxi, everybody should know Xiaoxi's name, and I think Jordan has a good basically experience with Xiaoxi when he was in the LMS. This man is a really damn good support shot caller. And so it not only emboldened them and got them on the same page, but they were making the right calls early on the split too.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this team was Xiaoxi especially came in. He was handpicked by Sword Art to be his replacement for Flash Wolves. A lot of people don't know that, but he came in his first year and he's like, man, I don't feel comfortable taking over Sword Art's position. I'm not good enough. I'm not a shot caller. And then in the second split of LMS, Flash Wolves didn't even make playoffs. So he got brought over, not even a playoff support in LMS. And that's why when you look at this roster, I actually didn't think E-Star, I thought they'd be 17th. I thought they'd be the last place team. But when you look at their skill, it's so much higher than the average LDL team. Like guys are just saying, Cryine's amazing. Wink, this split was probably a top 6 AD carry in the league. Xiaoxi was probably the best support in regular season. It's just their level of player skill was honestly insane.
And by the way, bearing in mind, everyone for years has made fun of the LPL for just picking up big names, famously Koreans, where they get the washed Korean, but they pay mega bucks. Whoever put this team together did a hell of a job with the eye test, with the scouting. As you say, when you look at them now, you why were these not on anyone's radar?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think here's my biggest issue with all of this, though. Like, because for this team that did make the right acquisitions, they fell off for good reason, right? Teams got better. And I think another big issue from the LPL side, or at least from a lot of the bigger teams, the bigger name teams like IG, FPX, EDG, RNG, WE, those teams actually just got weaker starting the split, right?
Yep.
Like WE lost CA and Mystic. Like losing Mystic is insane, by the way.
Yeah.
Like that was the biggest loss a team can possibly have. And then CA, I think, was at certain parts of the split was like the second best mid lane in at least for 2018 spring. And so like the fact that you lose both those powerhouses, RNG losing Uzi and Karsa, like EDG losing iBoy, FPX on they lost nobody. They just look bad, right? They just IG losing.
They added Khan, which was the mistake. But anyway.
Oh God, it was.
Subtraction by addition, as we call
We'll
it.
get into that.
But this was just the perfect landscape for a team to like come in and then make an impact. And I think while a lot of those teams are starting to get better, it's just crazy because hearing Wink being like the best, like a top 680 carry, that shouldn't even be a thing. It shouldn't. Like Jackie Love and Uzi are 10 times better. Karsa, no, not let me think.
iBoy, who are we talking about?
iBoy is better.
SMLZ.
SMLZ is another one. God, I'm actually Kramer. Yes,
Chung Wuji.
Kramer is actually such an insane 80 carry.
Of course.
So like Huanfeng, SMLZ, and Kramer didn't even make playoffs. Like a lot of these crazy 80 carries were not able to like push through. Jack iBoy was the other one. And so like Wink being in that position, I think was a perfect timing in what was a pretty weak spring split.
What happened to GA, by the way? Oh, he's on Dominus, I see.
Yeah. That team
and they were supposed to be like that team on paper, in my opinion, was supposed to be so good. I put them in playoffs. Like Natural on that team looked great. GA coming in was supposed to make it, like a good team. Didn't happen though.
Yeah, they just weren't on the same page with this as well. Like Natural is a great individual player who will play towards split pushing, but the Dominus as a team would just challenge for fights so consistently around objectives. And so it was like they were fighting amongst themselves in those games. It didn't make any sense. And also just experience. I mean, I thought Shia would add that level of experience, but to like the decision making, but it obviously wasn't showing. So that's another tragic point of that one. LGD, I think, while I was speaking Kramer's, saying that Kramer was playing really well, like LGD would have some great games. And probably their best game, sadly enough, because that doesn't show in the scorecard, was when they went up against FPX at the end of the split. Because while it still ended in a 2-0 for FPX were just making the wrong calls every time. But they were just outplaying mechanically like these situations.
LGD was making the right calls every time, but I just remember what was that top lane gank game 1 where they were just executing like the worst way possible. Yeah. And it's like, well, what can you do?
Yeah, so like I think one thing that I would love to see in the LPL that we got in 2019 were strong teams that could challenge those hectic early mid-game playstyles. BLG used to be that when they had they had Meteor. He's still there, but the mid lane change to Fofo kind of changed that style away from being a little bit more methodical. It just happens, and everyone just kind of goes wild, and that's what you get.
By the way, in case people are confused by the context when Raz was saying like that, basically like, how is this guy like a top 6 LPL AD carry? Weird thing about this split, truly weird, is that the two best AD carries, Uzi and Jackie Love, just weren't playing. And Jackie Love was just sat in like contract prison or something, just waiting to get on a team. And so people might not know this again if they didn't follow the season. But yeah, Top Esports almost won the split. They only got Jackie Love in I think it was 3 weeks from the end of the split or something like that.
Jackie Love also looked pretty rough in the finals. He looked pretty rusty.
Well, they literally played 3 series in the regular season with him. 3 series. One of them was against V5, who hadn't won 1 series. So they pretty much played 2 series with him, honestly.
But fun fact, 3 series in the LPL is more games than most LCS and LEC
like
teams play in an entire season. So there you go.
The best of 3, remember, People have to remember that.
Yeah.
Remember, 18 maps is what you play 18 games in LCS. Well, if you had 3 series and they all went 3 games, that's 9. That's half an LCS split. I don't think anyone wondering yet why NA sucks.
we had 3 best of 3s every day of the week. So like there was so much LPL.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing too, is like now with the new format, I pointed this out, but like you can play more games in LCS playoffs than you do in your entire regular season if you go to, because you can play up to 5 best of 5s. So you can play up to 25 games, and you're dealing with an 18-game split. And of course, when I brought this up, people on Twitter were like, Monty, aren't you happy they switched to double elimination? Why are you complaining? I'm like, yes, because the system is still stupid. It's just slightly less stupid than it was. And by the way, I love the players too, because the Players Association said when they switched back to best of ones, they were like, we don't really get much out of best of 3s. I'm like, what? You get 2 to 3 times more stage experience playing real games that aren't your shitty scrims that you just FF out of after 3 minutes when you do some stupid level 1 invade. You don't get anything out of those? Anyway, that's enough of that.
There we go. There we go. Pretty.
Oh, God.
Yeah, the only thing that benefits in a best of 1 discussion is all broadcast related and all viewership related. Like best of 3s are just competitively more sound. They're better.
Even best of 2s, I honestly think were competitively much better as a coach. I enjoyed them.
I never had a problem with the best of 2 system. I thought it was interesting. But
here's what I also never understood, and I know this is going to sound weird because it doesn't quite make sense, but there's a logic to it. When everyone used to say, because this is how you can tell it's like something that someone says where it's like their first thought before they've then gone to like level 2 or 3 on the discussion, right? They would go, but the problem with the best of 2 is you don't ever get to decide who won. Well, technically you do, don't you? Because you could just play 1 game on each side and then you won red and then he won blue. Like you both won 1. Why do you have to have a 3rd game? Now, with that said, I understand it still doesn't feel as satisfying that it's not a decider because your brain's used to playoff series. But I agree, like best of 2 in League of Legends specifically actually had incredible like efficacy because of the fact there's the sides. So it was a way in theory you could even balance out the side advantages and see who is good on this side, who's good. I always thought it should have naturally made sense. I just get that like the most casual fan, it's going to be hard to get on board.
Yeah.
The thing I didn't like about best of 3s in some regions is you had some regions where it would be set like 2 teams, like 1 team gets blue twice, 1 team gets red once type thing, instead of like a team choosing, because obviously you can get a patch that's like really blue side favored, and then in like 1 month you have a patch that's very red side favored. So it just doesn't make sense unless the team is choosing, which a lot of leagues the team isn't choosing. It's just hard set. 1 team gets like a certain side once or twice.
Yeah. I mean, that's an avoidable thing, though, and I'd rather take that than have best of 1s where you still have exactly the same problem that you're describing. It's just because it's always going to be an odd number, right? Unless you do best of 2s. Yep. So, I mean, I don't really see too much of an issue with that overall. I mean, I think that the fundamental issue is like people will talk about viewership, but here's the thing. If you have good partner teams, LCS and LEC, they should be developing their own fan bases, and if they don't get viewership because their games are crap and they have no fans, whose fault is that? Well, I just go ahead and blame the teams. That's on them at that point in time. And I still think that the whole idea is so fucking wacky that we've heard from LCS, which is we want people to be LCS fans. I'm like, no, you're fans of teams. That's how fandom works. No one's like, I love all NFL. Like that, that person doesn't exist. Like,
well, it's like
wearing a T-shirt with an NFL logo down the street instead of their favorite team. Who is that guy? Who is that
back
guy?
In the day, Riot also internally, at least, used to say that like they wanted people to be fans of the game and the champions, not just the players. As though anyone, right, who's like a diehard like Cloud9 fan goes into the game like, come on, Blabber, come on, but wait a minute, the other guy's got Blabber's champion. What the hell? Now I'm a fan of him. Like. That doesn't exist either. That betrays like it makes you think the person coming up with that conclusion. It's like, are you actually a fan of the game, dude? Like, do you actually like esports? Can we get someone in who likes esports? Like, this is an esports show, guys.
Something that I think China does really well, the LPL does well on a domestic level, because I can criticize like the international approach because it's really difficult from an international viewer to be watching best of 3s for every like 17 teams. And at times they were happening at the same time because they're happening in different stadiums. But if you're domestically, of course, it makes it so much easier to be a fan of WE or RNG, not only from the level of going out and literally watching them in your city, but also in the fact that like now there's a specific time that is not like scheduled time for you to watch it, it's always going to be a best of 3 because there would never be a best of 1 in a single stadium from like an RNG, right?
Yeah,
that's just literally that's not a possibility. So like from a domestic approach, they made team fandom like incredibly valuable, and I think that's something that they can that the LCS could learn from, because right now it's literally just LCS teams kind of in charge of that, or at least like within the system that currently exists.
By the way, another reason also why you wouldn't want best of 1, as you say, in the LPL, is because you'd get that thing like the Mike Tyson effect, right? Everyone now who who wasn't alive back then thinks like, oh, everyone loved Mike Tyson because he was knocking everyone out. People used to, because it was like the first era when pay-per-view got massive. Yeah. People used to complain like a MFer when they would pay like £15 and then he would just knock someone out in 30 seconds. People were losing their shit. So I can only imagine going like, you queue up, you got all your gear on, you know, you got the popcorn, you got the beer, you had your snacks, you know, you're talking about, oh, it's going to be a great game. It's going to, and then so they do some absolutely stupid ass, like level 1 invade that just wrecks the whole game. And then the game's over in like 20 minutes. And you're like, what? Oh, they're like, that's it. That's it. Like, there's nothing else. You at least need best of 3 in the LPL just to give me like the viewer experience. Come on, man.
Give me a 2-game smash instead. Like, I remember the OMG grand opening that I was there for, like in Chengdu. I was like, this is not going to be, Sunning's going to smash them. But at least the audience that were decked out in OMG gear got to see the whole experience, including the grand opening. If it was just a game 1, goodbye. Goodbye your cash, your hard-earned money. It's not going anywhere.
I think also like it's unfair to compare China, obviously, because the level of esports fandom there is unparalleled compared to anywhere else in the world. They also have massive, dense cities that can support these arenas with the home games that are being played. But I will say, and this is a suggestion I've been making for years, at least in the LCS, an instant way to spice it up is to do what the fighting game community does and have East and West Coast rivalries. There's no reason why they can't take 6 teams on the East Coast and 6 teams on the West Coast, right? Build a studio in New York and then have them do probably, a double round robin inside their division, their East or West division, and then send them across the country to play one game against the opposite division. That's going to create way more hype and interest because it's going to suddenly split up all the teams. I mean, I think that would be an excellent addition for the LCS to make. Similarly, in Europe, you could easily do that as well, splitting it between Cologne and Paris or something like that, right? So I think there are super interesting ways that you can create rivalries and you can create storylines that don't really affect competitive integrity, and I think would be very interesting.
I'd support the idea. I think the only issue that we'd run into would be just like, I guess server locations are really easy to resolve, right? In that respect, if you put teams in different regions, like East Coast and West Coast, that you just have a scrim server on both sides, but it would be very difficult to scrim. It would be my only concern on that one, or get really good practice out of it. But I would say logistics is the only issue. And if logistics are the only issue, then yeah, you should at least make the attempt.
Yep, I agree with Rez.
Well, should we actually talk about the finals now? Because I had some, having not watched a ton of LPL.
Let me hear it. Let me hear it.
How the fuck did Top lose this final?
Yeah.
How the fuck did they lose? The throws were absolutely unreal in this final. Like, I can't begin to imagine. Like, game 1. What was going on with that Baron? Like the Baron throws, I mean,
oh god, holy
like the Baron
cow.
throws in this series were absolutely insane. And I would love to chalk this up to some they're just online bullshit, but they were they were on LAN just with no audience. What? Why were we watching this? This was terrible quality.
You start with this one first, Jordan. I want to hear you. You're the one casting the damn final.
Like, honestly, I feel like there's no good answer. So for like a preface, I actually predicted that JEG would 3-0. I didn't think Top Esports had a chance, despite the fact that they do probably have, they have individual players other than support, obviously. But I'm surprised JEG's early game was so bad because even game 1, I thought JEG completely outdrafted Top Esports. And then you look at, but Oh God, I love that Monty mentions the Barons because this series, oh God, we had three or four games where a team tries to sneak a Baron. It's like, what are you doing? This 20-minute Baron, like you're 4K gold ahead. You don't need to do this. Dragon's up in 30 seconds. What's going on? But
also, by the way, if anyone's wondering, because they might think, what, maybe you just started to strategically. No, they weren't Baron baiting. Like they would take the Baron to like 35%, then just come off the Baron when it's taken like half your health and just lose the team fight. It's like, what is this? That's the only option that doesn't make any sense in this scenario.
They actually jumped over the back of the pit and were like secretly trying to do the Baron. There was no bait. And the worst part is they weren't even on the same page. Raz mentioned this to me like once when he was like giving us some feedback about our cast that like, Knight just walks over the scuttle crowd. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
Knight had a really bad series. I'm just going to put that out there.
But he also saved the third game of this series because, like, it was another Baron throw, this time by JDG. And so, like, when I was watching this, I went from moments of, like, holy shit, that's super impressive, like, using the Corki package in that Baron fight and then flashing over the wall and then cleaning it up. I was like, that is some insane Corki play. Like, I was like, this guy is really fucking good. But the fact that they're throwing at these Barons is just completely ridiculous to me. I don't even agree with you about the draft between Top and JDG in game one. I actually really like Top's draft. You have a lane counter in the Lissandra to the LeBlanc, and you have a Set and a Lissandra to get into the back line against the Misfortune. Like, really, Loken should have been able to do absolutely nothing in this game. He should have just been CC'd forever. There's also the Lee Sin to get back there. So in the late game, I really, I was skeptical about where this damage was going to come from, and I think if Top hadn't just completely thrown at that Baron for no reason, they were in such a good place to set it up because Knight was just crapping on Yagao in the mid lane.
Yeah, my big take on the first game was so from a draft perspective, I like Top Esports draft only because they had a more reasonable mid jungle, right? Like Lissandra and Lee Sin's far easier to play out than LeBlanc and Olaf. That actually just in a mid game in a mid lane 2v2, Olaf does nothing.
What is he gonna do to Lissandra? Nothing.
Yeah. He literally cannot follow up on much of LeBlanc's damage. So it's more so like just playing to the overall late game comp. That Yuumi will work with Olaf, Yuumi will work with Ornn. But like Set is fantastic versus Ornn on side lane. They basically have push side lane, like a group and pick comp. Like TS had it's a little harder to actually play out because if you make a mistake, then the enemy team just outscales. But Top Esports had not only played the early game much better, like Kanavi actually made the early error and trying to gank Top, so he fell super behind in experience to the Lee Sin, which just shouldn't happen. So and Top were just getting the right picks, and then it got to the Baron. And here's my thing about it: I actually do not like. While I will never call for a team to just randomly sneak Baron when they have the level of advantage, but if you play to that, at least fully play to it. The reason why I criticized Knight was because like he just walked on Scuttle. The enemy had Scuttle, he just walked on it. It was literally just, I don't know if it was the pressure that came to him, but like he wasn't thinking. And so like I think that game one was pretty horrendous from that point of view, that like I can understand the mentality of we can sneak Baron because they have Scuttle Crab. If they won't expect it. That the amount of times an LPL team has done that is actually just ridiculous. But like, at least play to it, because if they find out, you lose time and tempo on the map. That's the bad case. But all of those champions should be able to get out of the pit for free.
By the way, if we're talking about Knight, because obviously everyone has watched LPL for the last 2 years, we're just waiting for him to go to a proper international tournament, because then we can actually start talking about, is he the best player in the world? Is he the best mid laner? We can put him in the conversation with all the names everyone else touts, Caps and Chovy last year and Faker and all those guys. But the thing is, man alive, that fifth game, like, why does he... I don't want him to be the top laner. Like, when he's playing for his championship with 1 game left, can he please just play the mid lane? Is that too much to ask?
I do want to point out, and I kept saying this on the cast, that like playing a final, which I'm sure all 4 of us know, is completely different. And this is Knight's first time actually being in a final. So it's interesting to see how he would like handle it. And he obviously didn't handle it well at all.
He was at least in a gauntlet finals versus IG for Worlds. So like that, he was on a big stage. And so for me, he had that experience. The game 5 point, at least like, I'll say a few things. Like for sure, he was insanely behind in the 5th game on the Sylas. I agree with taking those matchups because I think going Sylas top lane versus Ornn is correct. Going Aatrox mid versus the Cassidy was great. but the biggest issue is that he should have an understanding that at least the wave management understanding.
Yes, that was it. He got shit on because he doesn't understand the length of top lane.
Yes.
He got absolutely
wrecked.
wrecked.
This is one of the most intimidating top lanes in the entire game. So hence why I don't like that matchup.
Yeah. So like, I agree that in theory the matchup was correct, but the problem is if you, like Raz is saying, if you don't understand the length of top lane and you're not used to it, and especially because they drafted the Sejuani jungle against the Rek'Sai, he was basically set up to fail if he didn't understand when he could actually successfully push out, because he wasn't going to get help from Karsa realistically.
He was pathing down bot. He was pathing down bot when he was basically shoving up a wave into the turret, easiest gank of your life. And it was just constant that was going through.
I think no, I agree. I think it's just like, it was either like a draft. It was a poor draft decision to pick the Sejuani if they were planning to get cute, or it was. I'm curious, as since both of you guys have coaching experience now, how do you lead your team into that? Because for me, that conversation happens after you lock all champions and you're like, okay, guys, we're going to do this during that countdown while the coaches can still talk. And what should have happened is that there should have been a very clear expectation set at that point in time about jungle pathing with the Sejuani and how that had to play out. And it looked like that part of the conversation or those directions just literally didn't happen.
So I can start off by saying that, like, going through the draft itself for Game 5, I mean, I already talked about it. There's a level of acceptance that you have to have that, like, they just don't draft an optimal way, right? Going 3-pick Aatrox into Ornn instead of, like, picking Set and trying to flex it to support and top lane is just something that they don't do. And so coming into the draft, I think they were put in a pretty rough position. But even with that being said, like, you'd have to create a very set expectations, at least from your top lane, from Silas, to let himself get pushed in this matchup if the Sejuani is pathing bot side. It's just a basic, right? Especially that early on in the game, you can't kind of set up so the Sejuani is staying top side. That's just not economically like effective for her. And so I felt like it was just purely individual to look at that situation and say that he was playing that one out pretty poorly. And it wasn't even actually, Jordan, you go on to that point, because like I have this series, I just thought that Knight played, or at least they played around Knight poorly. Not only him individually, because in that game, remember, he was actually getting a good trade on the Ornn and then just died to 2 tower shots. Like, he is
that's so confusing to me, because the one he died to the turret shots, he was actually letting the wave push into him, right? Like, the wave was coming into his side. He chose to engage on the Ornn. And actually, this straight up 1v1 matchup, it actually isn't like Silas favored early on. Like, Ornn can come out ahead in these trades. Knight was actually just playing the trades well, but he just like over-aggressed. But I don't know. I agree with Raz. I think in isolation, it was kind of Knight playing poorly. But at the same time, I do think it's kind of a coaching mistake that we did just keep seeing Karsa path bot, but
that's why I was confused, because like it really did look like a lot of coaching issues about how that comp should be played out.
Well, doesn't that also play into oh, sorry, make your point, Max. Sorry.
Like China is very like coaching is very like at the same level as a player, where you don't see like NALCS or Korea where the coach is above the player, right? Like coach is very same level, and it's more of like you're a 6th player sort of thing. You're giving your opinion. You can't just come and say, oh, Knight, you should do this instead. It's not how it works. Like Knight's the best player in the league, right? Why should Knight listen to you? Why should the Shy listen to you? Why should Rookie listen to you? Whether it's right or wrong, this is how China really operates as a whole.
The thing I was going to ask was, like, how much of this also plays into Karsa's own individual form? Because listen, everyone's going to remember Karsa. Oh, the guy from RNG was like a monster. It's like he was mad up and down every time I saw him play this split. Like, he would have games that looked really good. There was some games that looked terrible.
He was like his season, this split was surprising, because I was on the people last year where you know a lot of people who maybe said Meteor was the best jungler in China. Actually, Raz might have been one of those people, but I think Karsa last split was amazing. I think you could have easily said he was the best jungler in the world. But
carrying RNG for sure.
Yeah, this split he was so hot and cold. Some games he would like by himself would lose the game. You even saw it in this series where some of his Lee Sin games were amazing. But like, I mean, this funny game was horrible. I think his game 4 wasn't that good, where he was also on the Lee Sin, and he has a lot of times where he'll show on a wave when he doesn't need to, just gives the enemy jungler his whole path, and then he'll just get invaded constantly. And yeah, this split was not good by Karsa at all, and we didn't even see him become decent until Jackie Love came in, and you just have to assume that he didn't have to shot call anymore at all. But a jungler should shot call early game regardless. Like, an AD carry cannot call the early game. It's not how the game should work.
Yeah, he largely, like, throughout his career, like, while he's incredibly good mechanically and also has a really good jungle sense, like, more dominant voices can take over. Like, that was the same case in RNG with Uzi and Ming, to be fair on that one. But also coming into this team, hearing just from, people in the scene that, like, Jackie Love took over in those courses, like, that's pretty bad, especially since, and here's an issue for me, this has just been my biggest problem with top esports. And while I predicted that they would win the finals, I think their biggest issue was that they would draft in a way that they would kind of need to play towards top side. Like 369 would play.
Dude,
there was
the Kenyans, the Jaces.
Yes, exactly. And like in the end of the split, he played Kennen, or at least like they picked Kennen specifically for a matchup, and then they split the map hard to bot. Like they made it so now Kennen had to like play 1v2, 1v3. Like they would draft in a way that every player seems like they're getting their kind of piece of the bread, like, and as if they were playing standard. And when they get into the game, it's like, oh, actually we're playing towards like Olaf bot, like towards bot side. It's like, I think they really needed to improve on that. And to their, to be fair to them, I think they did improve. It's just a very low bar to improve from. And on top of that, like specifically going to Karsa, if you had made that improvement and now it's like, okay, now you're in a best of 5 for finals, like that's a lot of repetition that you missed out on during the regular season that you just didn't get. I think game 3, even though they won that game, he had a huge advantage over Kanavi. I think it was Gragas versus Trundle, actually. It was that matchup.
Game 3 was just like draft. Like that game was actually... that game shouldn't have even happened. That game was honestly just completely decided by draft. It was so bad.
Well, also, there was a massive Baron throw that we talked about from JDG, even though they looked like they were in control of that game for a good point in time. And in fact, like, Knight was getting his shit pushed in for a lot of that laning phase. That was the game where Kanavi went into the jungle and fought Karsa in the early levels.
Yep.
Yes.
At the red buff. And then they killed him because Knight couldn't rotate. And I don't even know why Karsa and 369 took that fight, because Yagao was able to get there much faster. And also, I just don't think you're going to win a Renekton Trundle 2v2 with a Jace and a Gragas.
That's the issue, because Karsa actually would have had out-jungled Kanavi, would have had an experience advantage if he had either been more patient with mid or just conceded the red buff at that point, right? Because at that point, your mid laner cannot help you. He's too low in mana. He needs to base. Okay.
He was under his turret. He couldn't even rotate.
Exactly. You had now gotten your team to the next stage of the game. Incredibly good for a Corki. Like Jace would be fine with that as well. Even like they have a poke composition that wants to kind of get past that laning phase. And Karsa had done that until he coin flipped the red buff. It's like,
yeah, I didn't get that at all, because like Kanavi had so much pressure, and it's just like, just give it up. Just give it up.
Yeah.
Guy.
And he knew he was there. That was the weirdest part.
Yes, he knew he was. They opted into that fight. They opted into it. I'm sure Knight was like, I can't rotate, guys. I can't rotate. And they're just like, well, let's fight it anyway. See what happens.
That's what a lot of the times it's been stated before, that a lot of the takeaways can be just mechanical based. So I fear that team would just look at that and say, if Shock Blast was hit by Jace and he was like able to get the kill on Trundle Force before the other like larger numbers in that team would get there, then, oh yeah, we'd win. But that's not the case, right? Trundle could play a better, or Trundle could just back away and wait for the team to like group up. So like theoretically in any situation, Trundle just wins. But that was my issue on that one. Also, top esports, this is another issue that I had with the team, is that I just don't think that they're a good Lissandra team.
No way.
In game 1, when they were playing towards Rift Herald, first of all, the Rift Herald setup is bad, but like that's another issue. You just have Knight on Lissandra just sitting in a pixel bush waiting for the enemy team to get in there. He's just gonna get picked. Like and your team can't follow up if you make a fight, like start a fight from that area. Like he should have just been in a completely out of the bush if he wants to start a fight. And then of course there's like the bot lane attempt to pick on Orin. There was game 4 when they picked Lissandra again, and then they lost to the same, basically another like no setup on Dragon where Lissandra went in, but also like Karsa just died for it. They just completely didn't understand how to play around a Lissandra, because a Lissandra requires setup in fights. You require to be on the objective first and to have the enemy team come in, and Lissandra to be like essentially know what position she should be in to start the fight, and the team to play around that. But because the setup for top esports and all the objectives have been so bad and so hastened, it's like they would get to the 3rd step and they were like, okay, we're fighting anyways. That you should just not pick the champion was my underlying take. They can play around it really well in the early stages. They were getting like kills through mid off that, but in mid game it was pretty bad.
Since you referenced him there, we should obviously give some attention to Kanavi, because here's another player that kind of like if people had never watched LPL ever, maybe they've heard about Knight because of last year. Yeah. Kanavi was the MVP of the split, yet until that happened in the playoffs, I doubt you could even find his name on Reddit. It was never mentioned, but this guy was a contender for best jungler in the world. So one of the interesting things about that, I mean, I remember when me and you had our show last year, as we were breaking down the teams every week. Every single time we ever talked about Zoom and the Yagao, they were obviously 2 key talents that if they aren't already among the best then, they were going to be in the future. But adding in this jungler it just took them to another level, right?
Yes, a carry jungler that was honestly not only could command both, like I think Zoom and Yagao, and I think the broadcast, English broadcast, made a very eloquent point that Zoom and Yagao on the same page, that they will always rotate to you, and that really helped Kanavi out. Because Kanavi has great jungle sense. Like he knows when he should be invading on specific matchups. He will pick the best jungle matchup for himself. He was, I think, Jordan, if you can correct me, like the only jungler that was prioritizing Graves in the meta. Like Kindred was another good one as well. And so it made it so much easier for JDG to get great early advantages. And they wouldn't even really require these early advantages to kind of play their comp out. So Kanavi, I think, was a real blessing. Since they remember JD lost Clid also long ago, and they really needed to have a carry jungler that they can play around that would be a lot more aggressive, could start the fight, would be mechanically strong enough to kind of carry them through those engages. Kanavi is that. And so while I was writing JDG off because they couldn't really get another talent in my eyes, they found a beautiful one.
By the way, just a quick shout out to CV Max, the former coach of Griffin and now obviously the coach of Dragon X. This guy must be a genius because he had Tarzan and now he scouted Kanavi, and by the way, was going to have him on Dragon X if that hadn't gone out. That's unbelievable. That's like taking your first 2 ever picks at like shooting guard in the NBA and having like Michael Jordan and then Kobe Bryant next. Like, what? Like...
Well, it also underscores how stupid it was for the Griffin organization to pick that fight with CV Max, because obviously, they got mega screwed this year, Griffin, and just been on a constant decline since then. So, don't fuck with the guy.
No, I might.
Think of how big of a middle finger this was for Kanavi, right?
The interesting thing is I actually hear for JDG when Kanavi signed, one of the things they promised him is like, this team will play around you. Like it doesn't matter that you're the youngest player. Our solo laners will play around you. Our bot lane will play around you. Whatever you want, we'll give it to you. And you could actually see that in the way that JDG played. They're the only LPL team that actually played for jungle matchup. Like they would do whatever Kanavi wanted, even if they could set up ganks top or mid. Like Kanavi would go and steal wolves, he'd go and steal Gromp. That stuff didn't matter. Like it's all about Kanavi. So that's kind of really interesting to see that's what sold them. Like, hey, you're the young kid on the block, but we'll play for you.
I love it. So what are you guys thinking on how these playoffs kind of shaped up overall? Is this the final you were expecting? Because there was a lot of chaos towards the end of the LPL season. The semis were pretty convincing for both Top and JDG.
I'm sure we're going to criticize the ever-loving F out of both FPX and IG in about 5 minutes from now. But anyway, yeah, I agree, Monty.
Like, I want to point out that, like, FPX, I'm actually not surprised. I actually didn't think FPX was that good. I thought the way they played around objectives was actually horrible this split. The surprise for me was IG. Like, I expected IG to 3-0 or 3-1 TS. I didn't think they'd be this bad. The Shy playing so horribly was confusing. And
he had 2 series in a row where he was just ass. It was unbelievable.
He was actually terrible. And even if you could look at jungler, which it's like, it's surprising to me that they didn't sub in Ning sooner because Lilian does not play around lanes. He just farms all game. Ning will at least like camp the hell out of the Shy, and that's what you need. And they didn't do that until third place match, which third place match, it didn't even look like they cared. So
that's the part we have to talk about is the jungle scenario, because here's the problem, right? Obviously, anyone who watched Worlds, welcome back in the room. You can now, I know you've heard some names you maybe heard before. You weren't really following the conversation. You were like, maybe at some point they'll mention Blabber and Cloud9. No, like, but you heard about Lane and you heard about Ning because you saw Worlds, right? And you saw that obviously that was like a whole storyline there. So the problem here is obviously IG started the split pretty badly. And it was when they had Ning in the lineup, and then they took him out, they brought in Lane and turned it around. By the end, they won, I think it was like 8 series in a row or something mad. And the problem is, though, as you say, if you are the type of team IG is, it just doesn't make sense to have lanes. It just doesn't fit the laning strengths. That you're not going to make the most of having the best laners in the world. But the problem is, everyone knows Ning is like MLXG with all of his fear taken away and all of his limitations towards his mind. And they're just locked into some sort of fucked up suicide murder pact with Ning. Where on the one hand, he's like that crazy girl in high school he dated. He's giving you, she's pushing you, he's taking on the crazy, like, he's making you like kiss her in the middle, like show her tits in the middle of like a diner, like, oh my God, what are you doing? This is crazy. My mom could find out about this. But you know what? She's going to break your heart in the end. You know she's going to break your heart in the end. You've got to just say no, and you've got to just move on, because they've got to get rid of both of these guys, surely. Like, this is not the future of IG. They're not going to win the Worlds with either of these guys.
Like, I'll just start off with this and let Raz build off of it, but they actually started off the season great with Ning. Like, they were winning everything, and it's when they finally lost to E-Star where they're finally like, okay, well, we got O2'd. It's time to sub him out, time to put in Lilian. And I agree with you, Thorin. It makes no sense that you're going to have this guy who just farms all game when you have, like, the Shy's just going to sit under your turret all game. He's never going to, like, push and move mid. He will just stay there. Have Ning, who at least Ning is going to sit and try brush and make sure the Shy can do that safely, to where it's like, okay, sure, they were still winning with Lilian, but they were just winning off player skill. They were just like skill checking the enemy and coming out ahead. But man, I don't know. Like, if you're not going to change, I at least think they should keep Ning. Raz, I don't know if you disagree, but
After this,
you mute yourself.
Honestly, did I?
No, you're back. You're back.
Okay. I just don't know the path of this team, because what made this team who they are was skill checking with like all of these individuals who are really strong mechanically, like Ning included. Like, they would play like the whole win lane win game mentality to its T. Like, they would have incredibly short games where like the suicide pack of Ning would be impactful because he would die for greater advantages, right? His death would push the game to a faster pace, and it would be like Jackie Love, the Shy, and Rookie benefiting. Like, they don't have that anymore. And the idea of them swapping out Ning, I think is a fairly confidence-based player. That if you do that consistently, well, you have to have a direction with this team. Like, you have to either stick with Leon, who, I mean, if you're doing that, then you're thinking towards like pretty far into the future because he has still quite a bit to learn. Or if you go with Ning, then you better find that kind of ignition again, because losing Jackie Love takes that away. One of the biggest issues that IG's had coming into like 2018, 2019, when they finally like had that like glory, was like they needed a strong bottom lane that can contest early and were mechanically, ingenious. And I think Puff and Southwind are great. I love those acquisitions, but like Puff is not Jackie Love. Like, that is just the fact. And the way that they play with Puff is actually that he's on weak side pretty consistently, and he's there for team fights. And this is not the same level, especially if you're trying to punch above your weight, like going up against like some of the better AD carries, they will end up failing. He won LPL, like all LPL AD carry. I didn't think that was accurate.
That's not true, man. No way.
I had to ask like how the voting system went for that one, and I figured out it was a voting process through like casters, OBS, like that. There was a voting process for that, and I just think that so consistently favor just looking good. You know what I mean? Like, there would be a winning team. Like LWX got it because like consistently he would be the beneficiary of all of the resources for the team, and FPX were just a damn good team. So why wouldn't he like look like the best AD carry when that's just not a fact? I already kind of mentioned numerous AD carries who are better. And so like that takes away from the identity of IG. So I don't know, man. I just thought that coming into that series, that top esports were going to be better because they had better players. And it's so hard to say that.
Yeah, but this is what
going up against IG.
Is like, it's not like it was necessary to lose Jackie Love, because the problem is this, right? It's true in that team, especially if the Shy and Rookie are in form, you're going to play around them because it's obvious, like they're just the best players in the world at their positions and probably the most dominant as well. But I always used to say the thing I actually appreciated about Jackie Love is, aside from the times when those players were playing bad and they would focus around him, basically he was like the insurance policy. Like, he's going to do great on his own with no resources, and then every now and then, like obviously if he had Kaiser, he'll just pop off and carry a whole game himself. But the problem is, right, as much as he had his issues at times, couldn't you have just tried him with a different support? Like, is there some sort of law to the universe that he was only allowed to play an IG with Bowlan or not? Like, why not just bring in a different support and then we'll jack it up? That would, to me, would have fixed a lot of the problems, because then the jungler, they could probably do what they want with 3 amazing lanes like that.
Well, don't you think this is also like a problem with the meta, in that the combination of top lanes lessening importance with the loss of Jackie Love is sort of compounding the issues?
Say that one more time.
So the Shy, when he won Worlds, top lane didn't suck as much as it does now as a role. And so the combination of top lane sucking and also losing Jackie Love doesn't help you when your best player is, or the best top laner in the world is on your team. So
that hurt them quite a bit. Like, a lot of his bad games were just on Ornn. Like, he was never really a tank player to begin with, right?
He's not really an Ornn player.
He bought Doran's Blade on Ornn, for anyone who didn't know, one game against OMG. It was actually insane.
And like, that was a lot of the issues that the Shy had in that series weren't really mechanics based. It was more so like he was just making the wrong decisions, which I kind of knew from him in the past anyways. But like, they would always all in on those calls, and they were just the better players oftentimes. And so, like, and on top of that, like, jungle proximity would just be towards the Shy anyways. But now they're incentivized to play away from him because he's playing Ornn and he's still making the same decisions. And so, like, it's just a pretty catastrophic result. So, like, yeah, IG, like, the Shy isn't looking too good, mostly because, like, they're opting into, like, the meta is pretty bad for top lane, and he's opting into, like, the Ornn matchups rather than what every other team in the LPL is doing. He's like, I'm just gonna pick Renekton and Aatrox and try and outcarry that. I think it's the right call, but the most hilarious thing is it's not the call for IG. Like, IG should just play towards the Shy's carry options.
The weird part is that, like, and when he wants to carry, they still just opt into randomly blind picking Jace, which, you know, champions like Ornn are actually great into Jace. You just buy Bramble Vest first, and then Jace does absolutely nothing against you. And it makes no sense that he doesn't want to play Set. He doesn't actually, he does play Aatrox, but it's absolutely terrible. But going back to the original discussion, like, I actually thought Puff and Southwind would be great for this team, because Puff and Southwind should just sit bot, do nothing, like, feel fine going into team fights and be great. And Jackie Love's the type of player to where Jackie Love sometimes would actually go in. Like, okay, the Shine Rookie will go in and Jackie Love will flash in with them. And that's when IG would lose last split, to where Puff won't do that. Like, Rookie and the Shy can flash in, and Puff's gonna be like, okay, guys, you have fun. I'm gonna stand back here with Southwind, and I'm gonna, like, carry these team fights. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I actually don't think Puff, yeah, exactly. I don't think Puff played that bad in the playoffs. I actually really think it was kind of up to top and jungle. And it's kind of heartbreaking, because I think Rookie played amazingly, but it didn't matter.
Yeah, and just so people out there know, like, IG just didn't have a choice in losing Jackie Love. Like, I think from what happened in offseason, like, the best bet of being able to get Puff and Southwind from Vici were incredible. Like, that fact that Vici couldn't retain both of them while they got iBoy, I mean, Southwind is just an insane support. And if they had an option, they would probably get Jackie Love and Southwind. They'd probably get Jackie Love and another, like, a stronger, more
Jackie Love and Fate.
Support. Yeah. I mean, though, there was drama in what's it called? It's still not, a lot of information is not out there.
Apparently his brother's like his agent or something, and messed up the deals, like, or something. Wasn't that what was implied?
His cousin's his agent, and they were trying to hardball as, like, the idea behind it. I think they were trying to go into RNG, was like what people were saying.
Which seems like, listen, Jackie Love, if you've just spent your time with the solo runners taking all the attention, right? RNG only plays through bots, so this is your place you need to go, mate. Like, I bet that's literally where he wanted to go most desperately. And you get to replace Uzi I. That's like every. After all the years of everyone, like, you're behind Uzi I no matter what, because he's Uzi I. It's like, this is your dream. Like, it's the words you want to hear. So, what a clusterfuck that whole scenario was.
It was really weird. And this is where it gets really fuzzy. Like, what happened when he was kind of on RNG's side? Like, did RNG want him at the time, like there's rumors that like they didn't want him, so like they had his contract, and then like there was a huge buyout for him that was kind of controlled by RNG. So I don't know what fucking contract he had, like, or what circumstances were in his. He was just destroyed basically. At least it wasn't as hard as Knight in like 2017, but or 2018. But like but he was in a bad spot, and he couldn't get on RNG, and he didn't want to go on IG. So everyone was pretty pissed off. It actually blew up on Weibo. Literally, the owner of IG just went out there and started hard flaming the cousin the moment the cousin like took responsibility. So,
well, I mean, here's a little tip to everybody. Unless your relative is previously a lawyer or an agent, don't use them as your agent. I had to deal with this because Freeze uses his twin as his agent. That was a
see, for all you know, he's his own agent and you don't know.
That's true. That's true.
You never thought that one through, did you? So.
I can't prove that's not the same.
Does he even have a twin? Who knows?
But that was a huge problem in general. Not a very fun situation.
Very quick anecdote. A couple after Freeze basically was when he was in the wilderness, before he actually even was in the LFL and Turkey and the Spanish league and stuff, when he was just out after his HUK days where he obviously had the wrist problems and people just abandoned hope in him, I went and did a CSGO tournament. I think this was 2 years ago, and it was in Hungary, and he came from Czech Republic, which is like right nearby, to this tournament. I think he was like a caster for the League of Legends tournament there. And so I saw him, and then when I saw him, like he came over like, oh, hey, like, I didn't know you were here. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing a CSGO tournament. Like, we reconnected. I was like a friend of his back in the day. And then, but only at events, like just an acquaintance in that sense. So we're talking, it's going well. And then the next day, right, I come in and I'm in the toilet, and then Freeze walks in, and he walks in, you wouldn't believe this, he comes right next to me, starts going, and I look right, and normally I would just say something to me like, oh, what up, mate? Like, but I just noticed like the guy's not looking at me at all. Like when I go to brush my hands, like, he doesn't say anything. And this is obviously, that's the thing, Monty. I actually forgot that he had a twin, literally. So it was the twin. Like the twins never met me. The twins just go, this weird British guy's looking at me in the toilet all the time. Like,
giving me the eye for what the hell?
Exactly. And I was just thinking like, well, fucking, was he a fake or something? Was he so two-faced? He was just pretending to like me. Like everyone's gone. Like, well, I'm just on my own. Like, shit. Is it like that? Is it? It'd be like that, does it, Freeze? Come on. Exactly.
God damn it.
Too funny.
Should we go and hard flame FPX for a while now?
Sure.
Because here's the thing. I want to ask you guys a question, right? So I've always been someone where, listen, I love top lane carries. Like if anyone knows my favorite players, it's pretty obvious, right? But even though I love them, I do acknowledge that there's some people who are top lane carries. Like I have a new rule that I made a couple of years ago, which is the real standard. If you want to be the best top laner in the world, right? Yeah, you probably need to play carries because in the modern day you don't have to play tanks. But if you can play carries and whatever picks you want, but you can't ever play the weak side, you cannot be called the best top laner. You cannot, because the game will never be 100% you're the strong side. It doesn't matter as a result if you are the best carry with strong side ever, which by the way, I'd even say Khan's like in that billing, like he looks amazing. So if people don't know, everyone goes, it's weird because Khan used to look so much better on Longju, a team basically designed to allow him to carry. They literally had Praying Gorilla who were like, I think we've seen this before with a guy called Smeb, and just did that all day long. Like they just made this guy carry all day. And even then, he'd still have those games he just threw completely where you're like, what are you doing? Like, holy moly. So here's the thing I don't get, right? Is even when he was on the SKT team, I used to always say, dude, he is the obvious weakness on this team, that even though the others are all really good, if they don't win Worlds, he'll be the reason why. So then, right, in the off-season, I'm looking at all the off-season rumors, and I'm hearing like FPX might be going to pick up Khan. I'm like, okay, like put that to one side. And then I see a post, right, where on his stream, when The Shy was streaming, someone asks him about top laners, and he literally describes Khan as the ideal top laner. Then I hear FPX recruits him, right, who's just won Worlds, essentially with Gimgoon playing like Ultra Impact, like the whole, as in Impact, the Korean player team. Like his whole job is like, my job is just go even, don't lose, never throw the game, and then let Doinby do his stuff with the jungle and support. And then bot lane, obviously, they set LWO, so they just throw him alley-oops all day, and then when he puts the tip dunk in, everyone's like, oh my God, he's the best scorer in the world. So it makes sense now. Then you bring in Khan, and that's like, what is the rationale here? So do people in the LPL see Khan differently or something? Like, I don't know what the vision is to him.
This is definitely up for consideration of the worst GM move in League of Legends history. Like, it's so fundamentally wrong that I don't even understand how they possibly came to this conclusion.
Like, I want to say that I do believe that they need to change Gimgoon, especially this split. Gimgoon was pretty much an Aatrox one trick where if he wasn't on Aatrox, Gimgoon looked actually terrible. But playing for Khan was not the answer. Their bot lane demands so much attention. Like, their LWX and Christmas laning phase of split was not good. Like, straight up 2v2, they were not a good bot lane. Tien looked much worse playing around the increased, the faster jungle timers and the removal of catch-up XP. So Tien looked worse. And whenever they played for topside, which they wouldn't do all the time, their bot lane would just explode. And I actually don't think Khan looked bad even when he wouldn't get resources this split. But their bot lane and jungle would just look so bad.
It's weird. I think oftentimes when you make a shift like this, like your team mentality and playstyle is mid to bot. Like that's just FPX. Consistently. There'll be times where they will play to Gimgoon going into Worlds. But oftentimes that's like if they can't do anything bot side, if it feels like it's doomed, then they'll go top. And Gimgoon actually showed some pretty good games going into that Worlds run. And I think that, inconsistencies for sure were there for FPX this split. But for the most part, I was pretty happy with like how Gimgoon was faring. And most of my criticisms were towards like the team's overall like decision making early game. I think their decision making early game oftentimes was like, I think they bought into how hectic that they were playing and like how successful they were off that they didn't put as much time or effort into like how do we best set up for Rift Herald or disciplined timings around like dragons, right? Because like if that's what they want to play towards, like early like skirmishing, then they would ideally want to play to these objectives. But they were not kind of succeeding on that. And they were getting outpaced by teams that were just not even playoff teams. And I think that was my issue, was that they would not prioritize the right objectives, but they would still like skirmish their way out of it. Like in terms of just like raw mechanics from Doinb, Tien, LWX and Gimgoon. Like Chris was still an excellent support. So like I think that like pound for pound in terms of player strength, they were great. But then you add in Khan, and you were never going to play to topside originally. And it just seemed like whenever they went topside, it felt forced. And that was probably the hardest thing to take away from it, is that, to like Duncan's point, like Khan was already inconsistent. I didn't like the idea to begin with. When the announcement came out, I made an immediate reference to Kevin Durant. Like, Khan just literally lost in the finals to the team and decided to join them next. Like,
well, I just don't get it. Like, don't. And people will say like, "Oh, Monty, that wasn't the worst GM decision ever. They still placed top 4. They won. I guess they won the 3rd place match here in LPL." And it's like, but that's not the point. The point is they won Worlds and they found a way to make themselves worse. Like, why would you do that? And we can play some theoretical GMing here. If I'm coming off that Worlds win, I mean, Gimgoon's not a spectacular player, but he was consistent, and maybe you get a backup top laner that plays at his same style. If I'm FPX, I'm trying to replace LWX after that season. Fuck that guy. Like,
give us Jackie off.
Yeah,
give us Jackie off.
Actually, it's pretty sick.
Like, I think because the whole premise of FPX is that you have a highly mobile and highly synergized jungle, mid, and support core. And so you have to dump those resources into some carry position. We know it's not going to be top lane. Doinb plays all these weird-ass champs that are based around rotations and making plays in side lanes. So who's it going to be? It's got to be because here, let me back up. In a meta where we don't see the same level of jungle carries, where Kiana's not being played in the jungle like we saw at Worlds with FPX, you have to figure out, because you cannot control who's going to be strong in the meta. So if you're not carrying out of the jungle, guess who it's going to be? It's going to be the AD carry. So please just upgrade the AD carry position and dump a ton of resources into that guy. That's the way I think you GM if you're running FPX.
Especially in China. Please have a good AD carry in China. Come on. Also, I'll just say the joke anyway, because I didn't get it in before, but I like to reference it as many times as I can. So I have a joke. It's a similar, if anyone's watched my shows, you'll have heard a similar theme where I've done it before. So here's the joke about Khan. If you haven't watched Khan play enough, he's like a Korean Hoonie. There's the joke.
Oh my!
A slow burner, but you know.
I was like, "This is gonna add anything after that." Oh no! It just
all right. Anyway, whatever.
It stopped.
So what would you guys do if you're FPX? If you had to take a look at this roster right now and try and play to their strengths after seeing them win Worlds and then watching them throughout LPL Spring, how do you fix it?
Like for me, I think you were on the right point to where coming right off Worlds, I think the only person you replace is LWX if you want to upgrade. I think I agree with Thorin. I actually think the Jackie Love joke is pretty good. I think Jackie Love would have looked sick in this team,
he would have been
especially
good.
with Crisp, right? Yeah, it would have been amazing. But I do think Gimgu needed a sub, but Khan is not the type of sub you need. A player I think he would have done really well with, and a player that I know Ras talked up a ton last split was Morgan. And like Morgan was Zoom's understudy. So Morgan does such a good job of pretty much playing almost exactly like Zoom, where he's always going to move towards the objective. He's always going to play for the team. And it's like, I would have loved to see, and for anyone who doesn't know, Morgan is the top laner of WE, who actually had a surprisingly good run this split. They got to playoffs. They actually beat E-Star. So I think you get a player like Morgan as your understudy, or if you could afford Zoom, right? You bring in Zoom, you replace AD Carry. I think Duinbi, you can't replace Duinbi. He's the shot caller of his team. Chris was the best support last split. Tien, probably the best jungler last split. So that's what I would do as a GM.
You also open up an import slot if you do that.
Oh, true.
Which means you could get a Korean AD.
Well, Morgan is Korean, so like.
No, I was talking about Zoom. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, fair. My thing on this team, I actually would just run it back. A lot of the times, I think teams are a little bit too ambitious when they find so much success and immediately like, what roster decisions do we need to get better? When oftentimes you can, at least for one split, like Spring Split's probably the easiest one to get a good like taste of the landscape, or at least of your team and what drive they have to try and do it again. To see, like, at least in the split, if there's anyone waning in motivation, then at least by the end of the split or going into summer, then you can add someone who's challenging the position.
Like, I'd say,
my point was that in theory, I was fine with the concept of Khan, because Khan's mechanically strong. You put in that behind Gimgoon, who Gimgoon is kind of known as a little bit of a tilter, you know? Like, at least in solo queue, but for sure had like, they literally built a brand off of him smashing his table. Like, that's what he wanted to do for like his skin. His Gangplank skin is literally him smashing his table in Fury. But like, I think that was already taken by Bengi's Olaf. So like,
Bengi ruining everything as usual.
Oh god.
So if they wanted to do that in concept, I would run back that same team in spring, and if we saw people stagnating, then make acquisitions. Maybe they felt like they needed to make an acquisition like Khan early, or they would lose that possibility. But Khan is not, for me, a high value commodity early on in the split. You will find someone, at least in going into summer, that you think that can challenge. At least someone with no experience.
I think just based on contract timings, you actually just have to do it. Like, you don't have the luxury, because if you fuck it up, then you're just stuck there without a good pool of players for any kind of additions in summer. But that's why I said, like, add a backup player to Gimgoon. Yep. Like, you don't try and play two different styles. You just find a player to challenge. Because I do think, like, might as well have a backup to Gimgoon. He's not amazing, so throw somebody in there and see if they can challenge him for the
changes, you know, you don't want to have to not be able to play hard through top. So here's my move. Here I would do. Like, obviously, yeah, if you could do the dream one, you'd get Jackie Love, like we've said here. But the problem with that one is I don't really know if they would have even been in the bidding for that, if he'd want to go there even.
Well,
so
here's Zoom, like, it could have gotten Mystic or something like that too. Anyway.
That's if Zoom wants to join. No, that was unfortunately going to be what I'd say. What I would do is I would get a Chinese backup top laner, and I would have just gotten Mystic. Because after the treatment Mystic had for the last year and a half, this guy would be like kissing Doinby's feet every game. And then, by the way, him and Chris would smash these games. Like, they would be an unbelievable team.
That's true. Holy shit. Just keep Mystic. That's all I want.
Keep him in the LPL. The LPL. How could they let that guy go?
How did we get to this point in League of Legends where we're begging Korean players to stay in the LPL? I hate this. I hate this timeline. I fucking hate this timeline.
Exactly. That's how you know the LPL will way up in the rankings.
Bring Rookie back to Korea. Fuck this.
Retain our Korean talent. We must retain.
But yeah, it was funny to see Mystic from his Jin Air days like start to actually be good in China. That was quite the revelation, and it was interesting for him to come back as well to Korea. But I do
because the thing is,
kind of wish he had stayed.
Dude, they put him in like it wasn't this extreme because obviously, yeah, they had Shia, who was a pretty good player at times, but they almost at times did look like they put him in the fucking Teddy simulator. Like he was just like, well, it's all on my back to carry the whole game. And the amount of times he would still do it was ridiculous. Like he was one of those players where his team was like barely a playoff team, and you're like, this is so unfair. This guy's way better than some of the people making playoffs.
Do you guys remember how he got put in where like he had never played with WE before and randomly got thrown into that IEM where they beat GE Tigers? Like that was his first time playing with WE. And that's insane.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why when everyone famously says, and they were the 12th team in the LPL, it's like, no, they weren't the 12th team in the LPL. That was a different set of players. Like I think they kept like 2 people or something.
It was also Kuro's first time playing Yasuo, so I don't know what was going on there.
God.
I mean, it's last time the way that happened. So, but anyway, it set the tempo, at least, Monty, that you can learn that Kuro will fail you in the end. He will listen. He'll show you the promise, and at the end, he'll just pull it away. Pull that football away like Lucy, and I'm just Charlie Brown falling over.
This is an entire tangent, but I think Kuro is actually one of my least favorite players of all time. In that, why didn't they just replace him on every team he's ever been on? Like there was never any upside.
Mid lane, I know exactly.
Like imagine if he had been replaced by a good mid laner on literally any of his teams, and think about how much better all of his teams would have been. Like I just want
to throw out. As an LPL fan last split, he was the only LPL player playing Azir, and Azir's a boring champion to watch as an LPL fan. So I completely agree. Why didn't?
I actually thought I really wanted him to stay on PLG.
Right?
Huh?
Kuro got better towards the end when he was in LPL.
Yeah,
he was good, but again, he was the only person playing like Azir and Victor and these types of champions. As an LPL fan, I'm like, oh my god, BLG, please just LeBlanc, give me something.
Speaking of which, there's an example again of where the LPL does do the weird moves. It's like the people they recruit. Like, why are you recruiting Kuro, Easy Hoon, Bengi? Like, you are aware these are not LPL style players. Like, they don't fit any of your teams. Like, forget like you've gone to the wrong team. Like, what team could they have gone to?
It's all right.
Like,
I'm sure Power of Evil's going to go to LPL soon in a completely nonsensical move.
No, add it on.
There we go. Power of Evil, Paul Belter. Let's get them all over this.
Smithy.
Pile it on. Like, I thought that that's kind of goes back to the earlier point. Like I loved personally, I don't know why I get a satisfaction out of it, but like when Kuro came into BLG and basically forced them to be a Korean style team, being a lot slower paced, and we're trying their hardest to not take random fights. I enjoyed that. Like that challenged other teams.
You're like, this is refreshing.
It's like literally, I can talk. I can communicate as a commentator what the team is doing ideally. And like I thought that was first, not only for me, selfishly, but also like when teams went internationally, they got a breadth of experience with all styles. Like they would go up against BLG and would have to like FPX. I think yes, FPX went up against BLG in playoffs and like they beat them. It was a difficult series, but they had to learn how to play slow to be able to at least like understand. The decision making in mid and late game didn't have to always be group up and fight, and they accomplished that. I love the fact that you get challenged, but now in the LPL throughout the gauntlet, it's skirmish versus skirmish versus skirmish.
Yes.
There's really no diversity there.
I love it. Dude, Raz, like I'd say rationally, you are completely correct. I agree with you 100%. But again, as someone who wants like teams like Rogue Warriors and Victory 5 who just fight every single second, I just completely disagree. I want the bloodshed, my friend.
See, this is what's so
Here's
disappointing
the analogy,
about...
though. I'll give you a quick analogy here, right? The point is this: it's why do that in the LPL? Do that in the LCK. That would make sense. That actually, because basically BLG was like a guy walking around one of those like eyes wide shut like orgies, and he's just going like, no, I'm sorry, I'll just watch. And he's canopy. It's like the whole point of being there is just get jumping with both feet. Like, come on.
But this is why I hate Kuro.
Game's a bit weird today, boys. You know, it's just that's where we're going. That's where we're going. I've got some on the
getting
brain.
Sexy. This is why I hate Kuro. Kuro is like the bane of my existence. Okay, so I'm in Korea. He shows up, and all I want is the Rox Tigers or Ku Tigers, or whatever iteration you have of the Tigers, to do something and win. But he's not good enough to like push them over the top, okay? And then you're saying, oh, wow, I really liked him in China. So what, he gets good when he leaves? And now I can't enjoy him playing anymore. And you know what? You know who signs him next? He comes back and ruins KT. Well, thanks a fucking lot, guy. Like,
I would also like to point out that
Kuro
he
is
didn't do
actually
well.
like hard trolling my entire life. Like,
I will
he can
say,
only be good when he's not in Korea, and when he's in Korea, he's ruining teams that I like.
He also couldn't make it to Worlds when I thought I called them third best team for sure, and then they just hard flopped in Gauntlet. So yeah, it didn't work out there, at least from the tail end of LPL.
God damn.
At least, man.
All right, we should take a break real quick. I do think that we have a good conversation to discuss about Jatt going to TL, considering that we have 3 casters who have also coached on this show, which is rare. So
a lot of people didn't know I actually coached. It was SK Gaming back in a season. Oh, did you do some coaching money? I wasn't there. I heard from my mate Reggie that you were never actually coached, so I don't know why you're putting on fake. Why are you fronting? That's all I'm gonna say.
He was the literal Zordon of the CLG.
We are back in 2014 here. You understand that? So I'm reviving all the old storylines. So it's Days of Their Lives all over again. The LCS edition.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in just a second.
Howdy there, buckaroos and buckarettes, and welcome to another edition of the Cloud9 Roundup here on the 9 Summon and Insight presented by AT&T. Now, there wasn't much League of Legends news this week, but we held our own little tournament here at Cloud9. It was the Red Bull 1 vs 1 King of the Cloud Cup, and it was casted by yours truly. We got to see some of those League of Legends LCS players and Academy players duke it out in the top lane one-on-one, with Fudge, the Academy top laner, coming out on top over the mid laner in the LCS, Niski. Congratulations to Fudge on his big win. Also, if you're craving some of that LCS, I'd take a look at the Cloud9 YouTube channel. Our content team's been hard at work making a 50-minute long, split-long documentary for you. It's great if you're a Cloud9 fan to get that look behind the scenes on the championship split of C9. Now, if you're a Teamfight Tactics fan, you might be watching that Giant Slayer series, and Crone from Cloud9 finished in 8th place. Best keep an eye on that channel, because my old friend Noah, now he's doing some TFT casting for them, and you don't want to miss that either. Over in CSGO, it's been a busy week for the Cloud9 boys. They've been playing in the ESL Road to Rio North America, picking up 2-1 victories over both Gen G and the big upset over Evil Geniuses, a loss versus 100 Thieves, but they ain't done yet. They'll be advancing to the next stage, so good luck to C9 CSGO. Over in Valorant, now we don't have a lot of news, but the player the Cloud9 has signed, their old CSGO player TenZ, well, he is the first ranked player to reach the Valorant title. Now, that might be confusing for you because the game's called Valorant and the highest rank's called Valorant. He is the first Valorant player in North America. I know it's stupid, but I don't think Riot's going to change it. London Spitfire, over in the Overwatch League, you haven't heard from them in quite some time. Now, they've been settling down at their new digs in Korea, but they're going to be back against the Chengdu Hunters on May 9th, so it'll be our first chance to look at the London Spitfire in quite some time. And that's mighty important because this is a very young team, and I hope we've seen them develop quite a bit since their matches a couple months back. That'll do it this week on the Cloud9 Roundup. We'll be seeing you again for the Roundup once we get back into the 9 Summon and Insight presented by AT&T right before the summer split. Till then, happy trails to you.
Welcome back. Short break that time. Everybody prompt in their return so we can talk a little bit about Jatt moving to Team Liquid, which was the big LCS news this week. Obviously, really interesting, not something that I think many people would have predicted. I didn't even know about it, which is very surprising to me that I didn't hear about this happening before it happened. But I think it's a super interesting move, and considering that I was doing casting and coaching simultaneously. Raz, you have moved from casting to coaching. Lyric, you have moved from coaching to casting. Let's talk about how this move actually works in principle. So, Raz, what was your rationale behind wanting to go, come back to the States and start coaching for Academy?
I mean, you technically did a little bit of coaching, right? Weren't you like an assistant coach or something?
So I
Dig,
did
think it was,
coaching.
right?
I actually did coaching. I did assistant coaching when I was Dignitas EU, and then I did head coaching with Dignitas North America for like one split.
Right.
And then I moved into casting. Pretty easy transition because at least from an analyst, like it's a refreshing point of view to just be able to say what your experiences are, and also the game to a great degree, so you can explain that. The only issues would literally just be communication, like being able to succinctly get your points out as the game is happening in front of you. And while it would probably be easy to do that in North America and in Korea and Europe, and then LPL, it's like, oh, you gotta wait a minute, you gotta do it in 5 seconds and then pass it off to the play-by-play, and you're like, well, okay. It's literally just a game of hot potato. But like going back into coaching, like for me, being a caster doesn't assume skills. It doesn't, like, at least being a color caster, it assumes at least if you are respected enough from the community, and if you're at a certain level, game knowledge for sure. Like you should understand a good amount of game because you're living the game, much like most of these the coaches themselves. Like if you're a strong caster in your own right, you're studying the game every day. Like it is your life. You're studying the patches. It's hard for you to realize and actually like kind of practice a lot of the concepts that you have in mind, so they just kind of live there. That's my only problem as a caster, is that like you can't see unless if a team allows you access to see their scrims. Most of the time you're like, in theory this is a really good pick and I think teams should be picking this, but they're not for like multiple weeks, right?
Well, you can also talk to players about that, and honestly, I have had this criticism before of LCS casters in particular, is that they literally don't even ask to watch scrims. I ask to watch scrims constantly, like both in League of Legends and Overwatch. I would go to team houses and watch scrims in the room so that I can see how their communication structure is, how they're working together, et cetera, et cetera. And not all teams, but most teams are very amenable to that. And I asked, at least when I owned a team in LCS, I know that wasn't happening. The casters weren't asking. And I came this year to Cloud9 and I asked Jack, have you had any requests from casters to watch scrims? And he said no. So I know it's still not happening. So
and like
that's weird to me.
Like a Chinese side, like I'm kind of like fortunate since I come from LMS, which was right next to these regions, and a lot of LMS coaches moved to China. But like when I see things like Trundle first pick, I will ask everyone I know in like the LPL scene, like, hey, why is this a thing? I'll ask all the coaches, all the players I know. And yeah, it's something I think is kind of nice.
So one thing that, because my first advice to a lot of casters coming in is to ask players questions. It doesn't matter where they're from, right? Europe, North America, just ask players and you'll get, and coaches as well. They won't bite. they have their reasoning for like picks and what they think is strong in the meta to like at least align with what you think and believe is good. To the point about Jatt, actually, I think Jatt, from the small stint that I had so far with Academy, like he was one person that actually like got asked and was able to get that kind of insight in scrims. And so like Jatt was really good at that. And so that's why I think that Jatt is probably like, I would say the perfect caster to be making that transition now of course of the pool of casters to be making it from casting back to coaching. So like for him, it should work. I think he's a person who consistently focuses on the game day to day. Every single time I listen to him in his cast, like you can see him always spitballing or at least like talking about concepts. And I think concepts are incredibly important, and a structure is incredibly important when you're coming into head coaching. And he has that. The hardest part is just kind of knowing the day-to-days of a team, right? Because they're different in every team, obviously. And when you come into a new environment, understanding your role and how it aligns with what is a pretty big coaching staff from Team Liquid side, and what you can do to kind of help and direct the team. An issue that I ran into this split was more so like, how much of a heavy hand in guiding a team playstyle do I want to have, right? Because a lot of these players have been on this team, and at least for Team Liquid, you can see that how successful they were and the champions that they got. Does Jatt want to be like, I think this is the way we play the game, and I want you to follow it, or at least to make the attempt. He's made in his brief video of him coming onto the team that he's not going to do that, or at least like he's just going to be getting people on the same page, which I think is really important and a good starting point. So like I think he's going to be very successful. One thing that the community needs to know though is that's not necessarily going to turn into wins. So like when the team starts losing, and it's gonna happen.
I've got a counterpoint for that though. He does have that dog that knows who's going to win the game.
There you go.
That's I think that's the OP like throw-in pick to the deal that everyone's not talking about.
Yeah.
You know, Kubo, that's the real sleeper OP assistant coach in the LCS for me.
Yeah, and you know, I had lunch with Jatt, I don't know, like 6 weeks ago or something like that, and we talked about
drop.
it's actually important to the context of this conversation.
With, you know, like Reggie the other day, but you know, you didn't come up. So anyway, what are you going to tell us here?
You know, we talked a lot about why he went to the balance team, and I really think like he's reinvigorated, and I think that it makes sense that considering that's what he was hired for to do initially at Riot, that he wanted to kind of explore that and see what it was like. And I think we've seen since he's come back to casting, at least he's been really reinvigorated, honestly. Like he's loosened up a lot. He's he's a lot more personable, less uptight, like a lot funnier, which are not qualities that he always had. Like he's actually changed a lot as a person, in my opinion, since I've known him. And what I would have said, and what I have said to his face, is that previously I thought that he really lacked active leadership skills, in that I'm not going to get into specifics, but I think that when he, and I've told him this, I think that when he was presented with problems previously, that he did not step up in the way that I would like to see a person in a leadership position step up. And I think that I think that that's probably changed now, which would be my main concern with him coming into a coaching role. But I think he, just from being around him, he feels much more comfortable in who he is. And that is really, he's willing to put himself on the line in a way now more, and seek confrontation in a way now more that I had not seen previously. And I think that's a really good change for him as a person, and gives me a lot more confidence in his ability to be an emotional leader. Because remember, Kane's still on this roster. He was just moved to a strategic coaching role. So it's not like Jatt is going to be expected. And when we talked about what Team Liquid was doing on the last show, we were thinking they'd bring in somebody who's more of the Korean style head coach, who is the emotional leader of the team, who's structuring practice, who's solving disputes between players. Because when you move Kane to strategic coach, that's kind of the implication of what's going to happen. Like, this person who's coming in is not going to be responsible for leading the strategy of the team. And so,
by the way, I'd like to be Broxer in that team as well. Right? You already had a bad first split, like didn't go well. You only got there late, and then there was all that pressure. And now your new coach is the only guy who actually predicted like IG to beat Fnac in that final on that desk. Like, he doesn't even believe in you, dude. Like, he'd rather have like Ning in there at this point. He's like, "What the hell? I love you now, Broxer. You're really good, bro."
But yeah, I think if this had been 3 years ago, like, I would have very little confidence in Jatt's ability to be that emotional leader, but I think a lot of that's changed now. So I have more confidence.
What I really loved about being commentator in the LPL is that it gave me the opportunity to develop my own personal skills that weren't really related to the pure just like talking about the game, right? Like it's more of a, you can think more introspectively. You can, like, I became a much better leader. Because I had the ability to kind of look at, you know, why am I not confident in these circumstances? And like, how would I approach like these situations? And like, beginning of when I first started LPL, I was a little shithead just trying to learn how to cast, right? But then by the end of it, I was literally caster lead of a team, and I was kind of working with the team on a day-to-day. And I felt like, you know, I was developing personally, where previously when coaching, that's very hard to do so when you're managing multiple people in a team environment. So I think that's probably why Jatt saw so much change. And also, you know, the experiences that he's probably had from moving from casting to, what was it? Balance. Working with the dev team. Balance.
Well, it was balance, casting, coach. That's the sequence.
Okay. And so like, I'm sure that like the numerous experiences really help with this one. It just really comes down to what he's actually like. There's a lot that we're not going to be able to see.
Yeah, and
yeah,
his pro career, like obviously being a pro in Dignitas in 2011 is not anywhere near what being a pro is today. Like, so, but at least he has at least a limited experience of being a professional player himself. I think he's got his work cut out for him. I think it's incredibly difficult to join the Liquid roster right now after they are at the lowest point they've been in the last 2.5 years. And you have 2 former world champions who are definitely very set in their ways. And you only have 1 new player. Well, you got Tactical, I guess, now as well. So you have a rookie to work with at a position that was filled by the very best NA player to have ever played the game. Yeah. And you're coming into this kind of mess of a team. Like that's, I respect Jatt's balls because I don't know. I don't think I would have done that. I don't think I would have been like, this is the challenge for me because it's the expectations are so high that it's kind of ridiculous, right? Because the bar was set at 4 consecutive championships, and now there's this horrible split they're coming off of. And it's not like just improving is going to be good enough for the fans. Like they want to get back to number 1.
And that's the thing. It's not even just the fans, it's the players as well. Like in terms of like, I'm sure that he can go into the split and actually have a meaningful impact. But what would a meaningful impact mean for the team? Because you already talked about like Core JJ.
Maybe some better top lane play, but anyway, continue.
There we
go. Sorry, continue.
Like Core JJ expects championships. Like, Jensen, even of course Bruxa, like all of these players have been in final situations so frequently. And I don't think anyone really expects this team to be a finalist and going in an next split. Things can change. They don't certainly expect them beating C9. That's actually a dream. I don't expect them, like TSM got better. EG has actually gotten so much better with an already pretty talented team. Like I think Team Liquid has, because of these championships that they've been having consistently, have high expectations, and because of the players that are remaining have humongous expectations, that needs to start getting tamped down. Because honestly, the worst thing is that I think Jatt is set up to fail because of the environment that he's in, or at least like the circumstances that he's in. So like set up to fail in terms of, he's gonna have a lot of shit to work with a team, I can imagine, but also just like the name, the hype, everything that's kind of being put on his shoulders is a bit much.
Also, I'll throw in there as well, if you're coming into a team with problems, the one thing you always want as a coach is I want time. Like I want to be able to implement what I want to do, and I want to work with it. I want to test things out. Yeah. Every player except Core JJ is basically on like a contract year. If you know anything about contract years in sports, that's not the year where you let the coach tell you to play completely a different style and potentially tank your next contract. What you want to do on the contract year is play all comfort and show off who you are, who you've built up as a player. If you're Jensen, you want to be the mid lane carry. If you're Impact, you want to show your amazing weeks. You want to do all the things that you're normally really good at. So that's a tougher scenario, I think, to then get those buy-in from those players. Then again, losing might help. Maybe that puts a fire under them.
It's also, we don't know what his contract looks like, but if I'm Jatt, I don't go for anything less than like through the end of 2021 guaranteed.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
You're
and some say who you pick up, all sorts of things if you're going to take a big deal like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like at least because just kind of feeling out the experience and treating it as what it is, a new experience. Trying his hardest, and I do think that it can turn into a long-term venture.
He's a fan of experiences, to be fair. Josh Leeson.
Oh,
all right.
I got you, Thorin. I got you.
It's all right. A lot of these jokes, some of them go over the heads. It's all right.
A lot of that, yeah.
I didn't think it'd get over your head, but fair enough.
I catch those. This is actual net.
Okay, right.
But yeah, like I think that he'll get a lot out of it, and I hope that he does stay, because I think the scene does need a good coaching staff and like a mature staff as well. And I think that's what he comes with, is a sense of maturity and being objective on a lot of points. Which I think actually another thing is, while it can create troubles, there being multiple cooks in a kitchen, including like him not necessarily being part of the strategy, it at least gives him the ability to kind of focus hard on just the team mentality that was degrading in the split.
What are your thoughts on casting and coaching there, Lyric? You're mighty quiet.
Yeah, like, I mean, especially relating to the Jatt thing, but I guess I'll start off with just, coaching to casting in general, to where, I saw you talking a lot yesterday, Monty, about like the ceiling that you have when you're a caster, which I obviously don't know of yet because I just started, but I'd say that ceiling kind of exists in coaching in a sense too, that unless you really plan on moving up to a GM role, I mean, right, unless you're just kind of happy coaching on whatever team you're on, or you can move up to a team that can really contest like Worlds or something like this, you're going to hit a similar ceiling. Though I can confirm to everyone out there, coaching definitely pays better than
exactly.
casting, at least in the LPL.
Let me put it this way. Guys. You will never make $500,000 a year casting. That's not a thing. That's not a thing that you can do. Okay.
Which, by the way, people legitimately, when this move was announced, were like, "But I'm sure you had an enormous contract in the league." It's a. Were you listening? Did you ever hear the reasons why Monty and them all didn't want to go to MSI? Why they did? Like, it's kind of a precedent set here, guys. That like it used to, the problem is, like, a very quick tangent. The problem that League of Legends has, if you're a caster, is it's not like a game like Dota or CSGO, where if I don't get hired by this tournament, I just go and cast the second best tournament and I'd show off my skills there. And then so there's competition and the wages and that. It's like there's only X amount of casters can do the LPL. There's only X amount of casters can do LCS. There's only X amount. So as a result, it's very easy to get shot out. And also it's harder to leverage like your individual brand to get more money, because at the end of the day, even if you're like pretty popular and you're going up, if they just say, "No, you're playing hardball," I'm going to say no. Then you're just out.
Yeah, look at what happened to me. Like, the thing is
yeah,
like,
you go to Overwatch. I mean,
the thing is though, it's like with casting in general, the way to make more money is via side hustles. Like, the existence of this very show was born of the fact that I was casting in Korea and I was trying to make content about Korean region, but also other regions, right? So I was trying to extend my reach, and that is how you have to do it. But the thing is, you're spending, as a coach and as a caster, if you're good, you're spending your entire day watching the game anyway. So yeah. I could spend all my time watching the game for more money or for less money. That's how it works, guys. And there isn't, and also it's about individual agency. If in a scenario where I'm an LEC caster and I have significant creative control over a project where I can contribute, that's awesome. LCS, don't really see a lot of that. Don't really see a lot of casters being enabled to make their own content, right? Like, Jatt was doing his own podcast, and maybe Riot was helping him with that a little bit, but, it's not like the league itself is not doing you favors. And indeed, it's not in their best interest. And here is where you have an issue with casting. Because if you're a coach, your boss's interest is your interest in terms of winning. If you are a caster and you have a bad producer, they are constantly trying to keep you down and feature you less because they don't want you to come back and negotiate for more money. They actually do not want you to be too valuable. Whereas a coach, if they think they can lock you up for a long-term contract and be part of that brand forever, like Bill Belichick on the New England Patriots, they're more than happy to pay you a shit ton of money. So,
and I would also say that's why my perspective is kind of like different, to where a lot of people are like, well, why would you move to coaching to casting? You must not have any coaching opportunities. But like, let's say like my casting limit, like I'm limited in casting, whether it's financial or in opportunity. Well, I could just always move back to coaching, right? Like,
exactly.
Like that opportunity is always there. And I'd actually say casting kind of helps you as a coach, because I'd say one of my weak points was being able to articulate my thoughts on the game in a very like succinct way, to where like being a caster forces me to obtain that skill, to where like knowing the game isn't enough. I need to know how to say this in the like simplest way possible to an audience. So I actually think having both skills is kind of nice. And I actually do believe there's a ceiling to both, but obviously the financial ceiling for coaching is just way, 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 way higher.
Yeah, I mean, there are coaches out there getting paid $1 million plus in League of Legends. There are exactly 0 casters making probably even, I would say, $300,000 in League of Legends. And that would be, I think, very generous without knowing, everybody's current rates.
Put it this way, without talking shit, which is a joke. I'm about to talk shit. I've said this before. I think I've made more than any caster I'm aware of in League of Legends every year for the last, 4 years, maybe?
Yeah.
That's not talking shit. As I said, it's not like I'm saying I'll make the most in the industry or whatever, but that's just the state of league casting. So the problem, like I said, it's because unfortunately the industry isn't aligned proportionately with like the size of the game. Like obviously the game's enormous. So you'd think, like for example, I've made this point in the past. I'm pretty sure Henry G in CSGO makes more than any of the casters in League of Legends. And yet League of Legends World Finals has way more viewers than the final of the major in CSGO. But that's because of the difference in the markets and the fact that essentially it's not like literally some nightmare like, oh, it's like it's a free market. Like, no, it's just like there's more room to leverage yourself and to build your brand essentially.
And also, it also, and I have referenced this on Twitter, the other problem that we're seeing happen is that even career growth is very difficult after a certain point in time. And like, honestly, in terms of League of Legends, for me, there were obviously my fight with Riot was one of the factors, but another factor that motivated me, and I also know motivated Papa Smithy, is like, where do you go after a certain point in time? I spent 5 years commentating the best region in the world. I was on the desk on 3 world finals. Like, where's the trajectory there? I love OGN, but I was never going to be given creative control over a broadcast that wasn't in my language, right? That was never going to happen. And understandably, like, they know what's best for their audience. I'm not Korean. I don't. And so I had to look for other opportunities, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to work on Overwatch League, because I had, until Nate left, I had a significant creative contribution. That's why I want to work on Flashpoint now. Like, so in terms, you just sort of hit a ceiling after a certain point in time, and like Papa hit that same ceiling. He cast like 2 world finals. Like, where do you go? What is the upside? So basically, once you hit that point, you are spending all your time watching the game. You've hit the peak amount of fame and recognition you can hit, but your money's capped out. So what do you do? And
just to add to this, because just a lot of people will throw my name out there. I'm not even anywhere near like that level. Like this is specifically to the people who have made it to the like mountain peaks of commentary. Jatt is exactly that person where he's done so much.
He's got how many world finals? Like 4?
Exactly. And then he's even like tried that thing where he was going to be on he chose to be on analyst desk because he wanted to find more creative kind of ways to express himself on the desk and like deep dive onto the cast. He's trying to push the limits. It felt like on broadcast. To be able to talk about the game. And so like, it's not even talking about the game. It's like, as you know, Raz, being on the desk is a very different skill from being a caster. Like you have great on-camera presence. I think you're extremely strong as a desk person. And in a lot of ways, I think I'm better on the desk than I am as a caster. But this is, you could see Jatt, he's never really been the desk guy. And like, that was a great opportunity for him to sort of explore his on-camera skills. But after that's done, like, where do you go? This is the same thing that I was facing at the end of this last year, which is like, well, why don't I go work for Cloud9 where I have a significant amount of agency, help build up Flashpoint and all these other tournaments. And I'm trying to pivot my own career, which you will see shortly, into doing a bunch of shows. And like, I'm trying to move into like the sort of sports talk show model and away from casting and the reason is I am fucking sick of working with devs and I just want to make my own shit my way. Right. And so this is a way to do it. Like, I'll talk a little bit about my situation, because I think people will compare me to that too much. And that's not even close. Like for me, I actually was kind of excited to go back in the LPL, or at least just like continue to commentate. And mostly because there's always a next level of growth, right? While Jatt had been able to achieve that mountain peak for so long, he's like, the hell am I supposed to do? I'm surprised he didn't get bored sooner, honestly. Like, I would have gotten bored.
Wait for a while and ruin the game or whatever with all the other guys. So, then he came back. I said,
With me, I was excited to go into that. But like, there are also just multiple challenges that come in front of you. Like for me, it was more so like finding more creative control within the domestic region that I was in. So like within the LPL, if there's not much that you can push for, because like what you just already said, Monty, about like, you're in a piggyback broadcast, you can only do so much, in which they say, no, you need to kind of ride the line that we're kind of pushing for. And that can get frustrating. That's something that you can't really, you don't have much control over. I think the current broadcast is actually really nice. At least they have like a pretty sick desk. So like from that perspective, it's much better. But at least creative control is something that's super limited, and you really can't do much. You can't control your environment as much as you can when you are literally a head coach of a team. You have a major say in that. And I think that's like a benefit on top of the pay that you're already referring to.
Like I can say is, I'm a new guy to casting, so I'm just kind of happy to be here and just talk about LPL games. But I could see it's like some of the people who've been here longer who really want to have more say in the broadcast and stuff like that, how frustrating it could be where, again, the answer is always like, well, again, we got to do what the Chinese side wants to do. And it's like, God, I can only imagine how frustrating that'll be if I choose to do this for 2 or 3 more years, right? So, yeah.
And like it is new to you, and like you're attaining this new skill. You're becoming more pithy, which you said is a skill that you think you need to develop even if you were to go back to coaching. So there are a lot of reasons to do it, and like it is valuable to do. It's just that, like you're saying, past a certain point, it becomes very difficult. I am encouraged at least to see that the Korean broadcast is doing things like the podcast with LS and Atlas. Like that is, and I had some opportunities at OGN because OGN really liked me to do things like the Countdown of Monte Cristo. Like they were willing to produce the shows that I wanted to produce. So I had more opportunities than other people who are working on that same project. So I am glad to see it expanding, but like LPL really has a long way to go in order to get there. And I hope it changes. I mean, we started out this show without you guys like talking about that issue with retention of casters in China, and that's just not acceptable for the best region in the world to have that kind of turnover.
I'll also give you like essentially like a devil's advocate for the position and why it's taken so long. It's because we have to realize esports' growth, even within the esports games that exist, like League of Legends, it's not like exponential, but it's crazy compared to any other field you'll ever see. Like if you go and watch like the NFL, commentary changes in the NFL, like a steamboat slowly turning. Maybe they let one guy do a little bit and a little bit later, but they don't like revolutionize the whole broadcast. The whole premise you have to remember is esports legitimately came from just having big LAN parties and then having an amateur tournament at the LAN party. And then eventually you have like some people want to spectate the LAN party tournament. And then eventually maybe one guy gets on a mic and goes, oh, and here we are, the guy's in the lead or whatever. Like, it was actually organic how it developed. So as a result, nobody ever designed these shows to be like, right, and then there's going to be 30 minutes because it's a really big game here. So we want you to be able to dive into the jungle pathing. And then after the game, let's give you 10 minutes before they play the next one. No, what they do is they run it almost like it's still back in the old school LAN party where it's like, right, get the games done as fast as possible. Like, there's 2 minutes here. They can talk about whatever as long as their mouths are moving. Like right now, I press the button on the camera, go ahead. Like, and so as a result, by default, you're just making the best of what you're given. But then when you do it for a long time and you develop your skill set, like you're talking about, you want to be able to show some of that off. You want to be able to like have a bit more breathing room or showcase something about the cast. But the problem is if the people who've done it think that it's like being a bus driver and it's just get from A to B on time and that's all you do, they're not going to be on board with moving to that side. It's going to be too radical for them. So that's why essentially you have to let some of the casters who want to do this hopefully become the guy who then hires people and decides that that's done. Like you have to basically become a producer. And as you say, in your case, you can never have done that because you will piggyback anyway. But I feel like it could be done in things like the LCS. It's just we haven't had that big leap up yet. I mean, Quickshot sort of did it in LEC, yeah.
It is being done in the LEC. Like, I know how that works over there for the most part. And like Quickshot and the other casters have a large amount of creative control, and they also have the support of producers that want to do that. One of the worst things about being in esports is what ended up happening in the West is as soon as esports started getting big, they started hiring a bunch of rando producers from traditional sports instead of elevating people from within esports. And what this did was that they have their ideas. And the problem that you run into with some of these producers is they are legit fucking bad at their jobs in terms of being a producer for esports, but they will not do things the right way because if that's successful, then it proves that they are unnecessary. And so you have a bunch of people who are just stealing paychecks who will not listen to what is actually right and will continue on their merry way creating garbage content for people that no one fucking wants to watch, and that because it's in their personal best interest. This happens a lot.
Yep. So I think this also happens like in other areas of esports too, where I feel like in League of Legends, especially I've seen Thorin. I remember one of your shows had a piece on GMs, but I feel like so often we hire GMs who have nothing to do with esports or League of Legends, and they're hiring people who have no idea anything about like League of Legends players or League of Legends staffs. And it's like, man, I don't know. This cannot keep happening in esports where we're hiring these people who like don't know any idea about what's going on within like the games themselves instead of just like moving people up within the game.
Yeah, and that's what I've been saying. Like, there are people who are in their 30s, 40s, even 50s who are very experienced endemic esports people right now who should.
I haven't hit 50 quite yet. Come on. Give me a break.
Scoots is out there, man. Scoots is out there. Red Eye and Scoots, hold it down. But my point is that there are. I can understand to a certain degree at the time if you wanted to not put a bunch of 25-year-olds in charge, which is a reasonable corporate position to take. But at the same time, you could have hired people who are receptive and collaborative instead of territorial. And that's been the big issue, is that I have found some producers, not everybody's like this, who are extremely collaborative, and I love having their take on things from traditional sports, and we can reach a happy medium. But unfortunately, a lot of these people are just so territorial that they will not listen to any amount of reason or anything different, and they're just going to continue marching on with something that people don't want. And that sucks.
Yeah, it depends on the experiences. Actually, because for me, I feel like I've been the lucky bastard, right? Because maybe at least from the LPL side, it's like we've always kind of fought to have a producer. Actually have one on the payroll, so that's an issue that I've been fighting for.
I mean, Clement's been pretty influential for you guys, right?
Yeah, Clement's been wonderful. I don't even know what his job is. I'm not gonna lie. He does.
He just does everything, doesn't he?
Yeah. He does do it. He does do everything.
The God.
Yeah, Clement just does a lot. But yeah, I had experiences when I went to international events, like great experiences, like EU and North American producers. So like, I feel like I'm the lucky idiot. I don't know. This is just me, but like that's why I don't really have anything negative to say about a producer. But I do know, like, you know.
Well, I think LEC's producers are crushing it right now. So
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't have. You know, I think LEC is actually one of the most compelling like creative broadcasts in esports right now, and it's not everybody's cup of tea. Like, but at least they're willing to experiment and they're willing to take risks. Which I mean,
like I say, I just set up the whole context that, like, you know, it was an industry that came from bare bones, and then we just built up something, and then we had some time, and that. So yeah, I get it, because they get to do some skits and have a little bit of fun, and definitely they get to work on something compared to what we had. That is brilliant, but like compared to what's possible,
yes,
like
I agree.
know. That's like going from being starving to like, okay, now they have like Salisbury steak. Like, okay, it's still not the best food in the world, though, is it? Like, let's go straight up the level.
Sure,
you know?
but we exist in a world.
Salisbury steak every now and then, but you know,
we exist in
not
a
every
world
day.
Where the developers like took away all of our food and then, you know, fed us dog food for years, and so now, you know, the Salisbury steak's kind of tasting good at this point.
Exactly, and I'm sick of the taste of LCS chow. So you know what? Let's get some quality food in here.
Well, so is Jatt apparently. So,
by the way, listen, we'll just say this in a funny way, and nobody will comment on it because we don't get anyone in trouble. But hey, Raz, remember that time I was going to do that LPL final? That was the thing, by the way, guys. There's an alternate universe where that happened, but again,
I've heard these stories. Oh, geez.
Let's not get in any trouble, everyone, shall we?
Well, on that note, I think we're probably done for today.
The ultimate reason why that would have been sick is because they weren't going to reveal it. They were just going to show me on the count. Can you even imagine people's brains when I just came on the count? On the fucking LPL finals of all things. I've never even hinted I was going to be on anything. I just appear like, oh, it's me, Thorin, and I'm the host of this thing. Like, what the? That would be so sick. It would be so sick.
It would
maybe too sick. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe someone knew. It'd be a little bit too extra. Maybe.
You got to put a stop to it the moment it was on the table.
They were like, listen, I've never asked for anything, but get that guy out. So it's like, well.
All right, guys. It's been fun. I think that wraps it. We'll get you guys back for some LPL talk. We shouldn't do LPL so infrequently because that's stupid when they're so good, especially as we're heading into Worlds. But appreciate you coming on to talk about the playoffs and the finals of the season. And thanks. Go watch more LPL because Lyric's a good caster. So
hell yeah. Let's go, Lyric.
We'll see you guys later.